Fire Tribe, where you at?
I hope you ready. Rising from the ashes and it's getting heavy. Conspiracies, we got plenty and some are scary. From aliens to Bigfoot, extraordinary. Yeah. Dan Unaki, Dan and the homie Romy. I was bugging out all the crazy things he showed me. Jesus bloodlines to the stars in the skies. Always a good time vibing with the Fire Tribe. Hey, so wake up, get it cracking. Rise out the ashes, I know you got a passion. Kick off the combo with theories, many conspiracies, other dimensions, plenty ancient history. Fire Tribe, where you at? Wake up. We about to get into it. I know you can't get enough. At home, at work, it don't matter. Turn it up. Rising from the ashes. You know what's up. Hey. Rising from the ashes.
Yo, what's up, Fire Tribe? Welcome to From the Ashes. I'm Danny Unaki Dan.
I'm the homie Romy. Hello.
What's up, homie?
Hey,
what's good,
baby.
Man?
Oh, everything, all the time. Yeah.
Well, today on the show, we have David Mathisen. He takes us on a galactic journey through the stars, and we talk about the concepts of good and evil and polarity and duality, but with the constellations. And it's fucking fascinating. It's so fucking good.
Astrotheology.
So good. He breaks it down to the ego, superego. It's a really great interview. Can't say enough good things about it. The other bangers that we got going on this month too. I mean, fuck, this is a great month.
Fuck.
If you haven't checked out episode 41 with Esoteric Eddie and episode 42 with Bruce de Torres, you need to go check those out. And this one is a fucking banger.
If you guys haven't deeply questioned and pondered the concept of God this month, and I'm talking to you, you know who I'm talking to, listeners, humans, beautiful existers that we see who watches the show. We know who's naughty. We know who's nice. Okay. We got homies over on the Telegram. All right. So if this month has been doing the thing and making you ponder God, let us know. We think about it. Just whatever you want, whatever it is, whatever type of any sort of thoughts that come up at all, just go over to Telegram and just write it down real quick. Just be like, pow. Yeah. We love it. We want to hear it. And we love you guys. So we want to hear what you guys also think because you're brilliant, smart motherfuckers. So just tell us. We love you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Also check out the Telegram. Go jump in the Telegram chats. Also check out the Patreon.
Oh, yes.
Roman just put it up for $3, $3 to get the cheap. Patreon right now.
Wow.
So cheap. Jump on the Patreon, $3. You get all our new solo shows and extra bonus shows. You can't afford not to.
Boom. Slap boom.
You know, we might only hold up the $3 for a limited number of people and then close it out. And then you'll be paying more. So
you want to be that VIP?
Jump over there now. Get at it.
What?
We're trying to form out that base Fire Tribe. The homies that are down from day one.
Tried and true.
You know?
Yup.
You know?
Yup.
Those are the real homies.
The squad.
And yeah, go check it out, man. We got lots of good stuff on there for you. And there's no intros on those shows.
Stop.
No intros to sit through.
Oh my God.
Just straight meat.
Just straight interviews. Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah. I know. I don't know what the fuck we're doing. But that's enough of that shit. Let's get into the real nitty gritty.
Yeah.
R
F
F
F
T
T T
A
news.
Ooh, yeah. News you can trust.
Angel dust. Yay. Yo.
What you got for us today, homie?
Well, let me tell you. Hold on. Man, what am I smoking? You're asking? I'm smoking
big fat dick coming from East Oakland.
Stop that slandish nonsense. I'm smoking on a scepter. What's a scepter? A scepter is a fetish. What's a fetish? A fetish is derived from the French fetiche, which comes from the Portuguese fetico, and this in turn from Latin feticilius, artificial, whatever. Fetish is an object believed to have supernatural powers, or in particular, a human-made object that has power over others. Essentially, a fetishism is the attribution of inherent value or powers to an object. So here's the deal. Starting this herbal smoke company, a botanical company with a friend. In the works, it's in the process. It's going to be a while before, things hit the shelf. I'm just making blends of herbs, right? And I brought this on the show a couple times. And I'm smoking these things. And in this one, we got a bunch. This is my dream blend, my dreamy dream blend.
Ooh.
300% mugwort. 100% lavender, blue vervain, lemon verbena, marshmallow root, and raspberry leaf, chamomile, and California poppy.
Oh.
And then I take this tincture and then I double boil off all the alcohol and I add honeycomb and vanilla. And then you add that to the herbs. And then you put it in the paper and you smoke the paper, right? And so I'm trying to get artists to make a logo and do these things because I'm terrible at logos. Dan knows I'm fucking terrible at logos. Like I'm so bad at logos. I have great ideas, but God fucking forbid I do any sort of visual art. I like to do the music, but visual art is not my fucking thing, right? So I was talking to one of my exes who's an amazing artist, and I said, hey, I want to hire you to do this. No, don't cut me any homie deals. I want to hire you as an artist to make this logo for me, right? And she says, first thing she says back, and this is classic, why she should never go to your ex for business. Jesus, what's wrong with me? But I was just like, yeah, Scepter Smokes, right? I sent her a couple designs that I had, and she's like, she's like, Scepter like doesn't make sense. Like no one knows what that is, and you want things to be catchy and marketing, and you want it to be easily grasped the eyes. And I was like, I was kind of set back by it, honestly. I was a little bit hurt, a little set back, because I know it's not true. I know that Scepter Smokes is a great fucking name. And what I want it to do, Dan, is I want it to inspire people to look up these things, right? We're creating a product that is real. I want to create real things for real people. Like I'm never going to create something that will eschew the humans away from the true nature of being. And through these herbs entering your body, right? I like to smoke. People smoke. People have been smoking for so gosh darn long. Dan, you be smoking right now. Look, he be looking like a dragon.
I am a dragon.
He is a dragon. Okay.
My other name is Dick Dragon in the Sands of Time.
Dick Dragon.
Medieval Private Eye.
I'm visualizing the flip book comic book right now. Just
yeah.
Ooh, is it like it's modern New York, or like 1980 steamy New York alleyway, and he's a dragon with a top coat? No.
Oh, so Medieval Private Eye.
So it's medieval
Private Eye. He's a detective in the medieval era.
Dick Dan.
Yeah, and his name is Dick Dragon.
Dragon.
Yeah, that's my idea.
Dick Dragon.
Dick Dragon through the sands of time.
He said Dick Dragon. Woo! That's some good shit. He thought that one out. And so, anyways, I I love scepters. They're cool. And then I started just looking them up. I mean, they go back to the earliest interpretations of human existence, right? Like through hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt and Sumer, and Aztec gods have scepters. Like there's always some sort of scepter being held by a deity or a god, and then it extends further out to us where humans have held scepters. There's the royal scepters. There's, so you have the connection. Anyway, I thought it was fucking great name, right? So she hits me with that. I was like, so does that mean you don't want to make it or what? And then she didn't respond to me for like 24 hours. And I was just like, whatever. So I found another artist. Anyways, labels are coming, y'all. Point I'm getting
Excellent.
at is I started looking up stuff to send this.
Send me a box.
I will send you a box. But I started looking up.
Send me a little variety pack.
Oh, I got you. I did make some really shitty labels, and I got them printed out at Staples, and I got some sample box I'm sending out to my partner person that we're doing this thing with. Anyways, let me finish this fucking story here. Okay. So I was looking up stuff on Google to send over to her to try to say, hey, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I think it's a special connection and why I think it's a symbolic name for this smoke, right? It's a scepter. You're wielding the scepter. And then I found this word fetish, which we all know here in America as what's your fetish, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's your fetish? What's your kink? What's your sex fetish?
What's your fetish?
So when I saw this word fetish, I was like, oh, weird. And I was also at the same time looking up like books by John Dee and was like getting into like some deep occult looking into stuff because I'm just trying to keep sharp on my toes. And then I was like, whoa, that's so cool. I just felt like it was meant to be at this time that I found this word fetish. So I'm just going to give a little background and history on it, and then I'm going to jump over to an herb, and then I'm going to pass it off to you. So here we go. History on the word fetish from Slickypedia, from Dick Dragon in the Sands of Time. And his slippery friend, Slickpedia. Initially, the Portuguese developed the concept of the fetish to refer to the objects used in religious practices by West African natives. The contemporary Portuguese fetico may refer to more neutral terms such as a charm, enchantment, or abracadabra, or more potentially offensive terms such as juju, witchcraft, witchery, conjuration, or bewitchment. The concept was popularized in Europe circa 1757, when Charles de Brosses used it in comparing West African religion to the magical aspects of ancient Egyptian religion. Later, Auguste Comte employed the concept in this theory of evolution of religion, wherein he posited fetishism as the earliest, most primitive stage, followed by polytheism and monotheism. However, ethnography and anthropology would classify some artifacts of monotheistic religions as fetishes. The 18th century intellectuals who articulated the theory of fetishism encountered this notion of descriptions of Guinea, contained in such popular voyage collections as Ramusio's Viaggio e Navigazione in 1550 and De Brais India Orientalalis 1597, Burgess's Haeclitis Posthumus in 1625, Churchill's Collection of the Voyages and Travels in 1732, Astley's A New General Collection of Voyages and Travels in 1746, and Prévost's Histoire Générale des Voyages in 1748. The theory of fetishism was articulated at the end of 18th century G.W.F. Hegel in Lectures of the Philosophy of History. According to Hegel, Africans were incapable of abstract thought. Wow! Their ideas and actions were governed by impulse. Therefore, a fetish object could be anything that was then arbitrarily imbued with imaginary powers. In the 19th and 20th century, Tyler and McLennan, historians of religion, held that the concept of fetishism fostered a shift from attention away from the relationship between people and God, to focus instead on a relationship between people and material objects, and this, in turn, allowed for the establishment of false models of causality for natural events. This they saw as religious fetishism or Santa Claus on Christmas Day, and does not consider the birth of Jesus a central problem historically or sociologically. So, yeah, that's fetishism in a WAP for you. And then I found a sweet book. Well, let's touch up on fetishism there for a second, and this terrible theory of fetishism that was articulated at the end of the 18th century by G.W.F. Hegel. And I'm looking at a picture of this guy right now. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was a German philosopher and is considered to be one of the most important figures in German idealism and one of the founding figures of Western philosophy, with his influence extending to the entire range of the contemporary philosophical issues. My problem with these, Western occultism and, magic and all, and these, characters like John Dee and Crowley and stuff is for this exact kind of instance. According to Hegel, Africans were incapable of abstract thought, and their ideas and actions were governed by impulse, and therefore a fetish object could be anything that was arbitrarily imbued with magical powers. I mean, it's just, like, I get it, right? They're not as, intellectually as ramped up as, some of these, German philosophers, but also they haven't been growing up reading the German philosophies. They're not given the same background. So the narrow-mindedness of these types of, people like G.W.F. Hegel and other philosophers of the Western movement, that's kind of like my big issue with it. Other than that, I kind of vibe with a lot of the, the stuff of Hermeticism and the other Western philosophies. Stem out of that. But other than that, it's just like, man, give the fucking Africans a break, dude. Like, you kidding me? They're amazing and they have other beliefs that you don't. Get over it, bud.
Yeah, man.
Anywho.
Fucked up.
Yeah, it is.
Why don't you go with hippie sticks? I liked hippie sticks.
Oh my God, he doesn't like scepter smoke. Oh my God. Okay,
I like
I'm gonna need.
Scepters. Scepters
what?
is cool.
No. You know what?
Smoking on a
I'm
scepter.
gonna let y'all decide. If you are listening to this and you're in the Telegram chat, let me know what you think. Scepter smokes or hippie sticks? Because I'll tell you what, my business partner right now is not gonna like us switching names this late in the game. So, but I would like to hear you guys' feedback, and it's probably gonna stay scepter smokes. Because we're having 5 different flavor blends tapped to the 5 different elements. Okay, earth, air, water, fire, and ether, and then they're going to be tied to 5 major arcana of the tarot deck. So each pack that you buy is going to have a tarot card slipped in there with the symbolic representation of the herbs to that. So it's all deeply intertwined. Wow. I'm telling you guys, it's very important. And my friend who she's like deep into, the tarot and a lot of that kind of history, and she's a woman, so she has this deep divine feminine knowledge that just doesn't encompass my Mosley self sometimes. And it's good to have this partner here for this product, because I think it's better represented that way a lot of times. And anyways, so here's another thing, okay? I want to let you guys know about a magical fucking thing called Polyricus ant extract, okay? Polyricus is a family of ants, and I started taking this herb, okay? They call it an herb in China. It's called the herb of kings, okay? So I started pairing this with pine pollen, right? And if you go and slide over onto Patreon, you'll see that I just interviewed the CEO of Lost Empire Herbs, where you can buy this amazing product. And I'm just going to read the article that they have about the benefits of this product off of lostempireherbs.com. Polyricus ant extract is a natural supplement used by the people of China for many centuries. Despite the fact that there are more 150 450 ant species. Only Polyricus has been officially approved by the China Ministry of Public Health. Studies have shown that Polyricus ant extract contains 8 amino acids, which have a direct influence on energy levels and endurance. And besides amino acids, this supplement is rich in iron, calcium, vitamins B12, B2, and B1, as well as zinc. The good news for those looking to increase and maintain their muscle mass is that Polyricus ant extract contains around 67% of protein. Deeper analysis revealed that ant extract also contains some hormones and steroid-like substances and traces superoxide dismutase, which is considered to be a very strong antioxidant, and adenosine triphosphate, in charge of energy transfer. Furthermore, anti-inflammatory properties come from the polyractide or polyractide and polyractide, as indicated by German research in 2009. This type of ant extract comes from the Polyricus ants caught in their natural habitat in the wilderness of Asia. Many who enjoy ginseng are aware of its benefits, but ant extracts provide even stronger effect, and it's why it's called the herb of kings. For this and other reasons, ant extract belongs to the same group of tonics like astragalus, reishi mushrooms, ginseng, and some of the most prominent benefits of Polyricus ant extract are increased vitality, better circulation, and replenished qi. It is known to regulate yin and yang and has anti-aging properties and improves sexual function through increased libido and fertility. It is likewise useful in those suffering from insomnia, stress, and constipation. From a scientific point of view, Polyricus ant extract is in charge of increasing the amount of DNA and RNA in human cells, which is one of the most powerful ways to slow down aging and speed up tissue rejuvenation. It is used in more serious conditions like hepatitis B by fortifying the immune reaction. Yeah, that's it. If you guys want to look up more about Polyricus ant extract, I highly recommend you do it. I take it, and I feel fucking great. I'm not going to lie. So,
yeah, and look how normal Roman is.
Yeah, you want to be normal like me, eat ants.
Oh man,
sorry, that's a lot of words.
Very wordy. You're very wordy today. So when we talk to David Mathisen, we talk about Ophiuchus. We talk and he gives a correlation to like Jesus and Moses in this interview. And when he was talking about Ophiuchus, I was looking up on the internet what constellation is opposite of Ophiuchus, because there's a lot of adversary talk. You know, the moon is the adversary to the sun, Satan is the adversary to God. So I was wondering, like, what is the opposite of Ophiuchus? And when I looked it up, it was Osiris. And I was like, oh, well, that's really fucking interesting. And so I looked up some like Osiris versus Ophiuchus type shit, and I found this article right here that comes from graveworm.com, and it's just not an author, it's just the site. It's Ophiuchus as Asclepius. Don't know if I'm saying that name right, but Asclepius, Asclepius. That's how I'm going to say it. The Greeks equated Ophiuchus, the serpent wrestler, with Asclepius, their god of medicine, who used snakes in healing rituals. The staff of Asclepius, with 2 snakes entangling it, is to this day used as a symbol of medicine. But Asclepius was not the originator god of healing. In Western myth, the first such deity is Isis, the Egyptian goddess of healing. It would seem that at some point the Greeks, with their patriarchal designs, subsumed the myth of Isis, filtered through Ophiuchus, and produced the god Asclepius. But the cult of Isis must have run deeply, and her place of veneration was not dispelled by changing her name and gender. Thus, in a final fit of patriarchal wisdom, the Greeks expunged her from the rightful place in the zodiac, thereby reducing what had become their own god of healing to a mere footnote to the tales from Mount Olympus. It is true that the Greeks needed to remove one of the original 13 constellations from the zodiac, defined as those constellations on the ecliptic and through which the sun passes in the course of a year, in order to accomplish their desire to have each sign rule for an even 30 degrees of sky. But when they would choose Ophiuchus Asclepius over Scorpio, can only be because of his goddess origins in Egypt. As one of the most powerful deities on par with Osiris and Thoth, all of whom answered only to Ra, Asclepius enters prominence in Greek myth with the death of Orion. Orion, the great hunter, having already been blinded by Enopoion for ravaging his daughter Merope, was later cured with the aid of Vulcan and decided to instead dwell with Artemis, goddess of the hunt, who is associated with the moon and the Roman goddess Diana. Unfortunately, Orion rapes one of her followers. Some say he raped Artemis herself, so she sends the scorpion to poison him, which it does, killing him. Enter Asclepius, pupil of Chiron, who is able to cure him of the scorpion's poison and thus resurrect him. After this, Orion ends up in the sky by varying means in various stories as the constellation we know exactly opposite the constellation of the scorpion, Scorpio. That cad Orion from his new height then spied the 7 Pleiades and began to covet them. Asclepius' part in the Orion myth is short, but far from insignificant. Zeus, recognizing the actions of Asclepius, transforms the mortal into the immortal Ophiuchus and places him in the sky, some say as punishment, some as veneration, with his heel ever grinding down on the back of the scorpion. Orion, it is well known, is equated with the Egyptian god Osiris, and the healing deity's role in the story of Osiris is treated with the full importance it deserves. And then this goes into Isis. Isis was the sister and wife of Osiris. Both were born of Nut with the aid of Thoth. It seems Nut, the wife of Ra, had a bit of trouble with fidelity and found herself pregnant, but not by Ra. Ra thus cursed her that her child could be born in no month of no year. At this point, Thoth, another of Nut's lovers, steps in and plays a game akin to checkers against the goddess of the moon, winning from her the 72nd part of each day of the 360-day year, creating 5 days that were no month of no year. Nut is then able to deliver Osiris on the first of these days, and Ra's curse is broken. She then gives birth to Horus on the second day, followed by Set, Isis, and Nephthys on the remaining days. Osiris grows up to be the great civilizer, the god who brought agriculture and civilization to Egypt, eradicating cannibalism from the land. He decides to then spread the arts of agriculture and civilization to all the lands of the world, and sets off, leaving his wife, sister Isis in charge. This enrages his brother Set, who conspires with 72 others to kill Osiris. Set and his conspirators trick Osiris into climbing into a coffin, at which point they seal it and hurl it into the Nile. Upon hearing the news, Isis consults Thoth, and he advises her to hide the papyrus by the river, lest they come for her next. In order to protect her, he sends 7 scorpions to accompany her. At some point in the form of a hawk, Isis finds Osiris' corpse, and their brief reunion creates Horus. Unfortunately, Horus, son of Isis, is stung and killed by one of the scorpions. Ra, taking pity on her, sends Sloth to her aid, and he teaches her a spell that will heal her son. Sure enough, the poison is extracted and Horus is resurrected. In the meantime, the body of Osiris in its coffin floats out to the sea and comes ashore in Byblos, where a sycamore tree sprouts and encases the coffin. Isis hears of this and goes to reclaim her husband's body, which, after some trouble, she succeeds in doing. She hides his remains and goes to find their son Horus, but in the meantime, Set finds the body and, fearing the new healing powers of Isis, cuts it up into 14 pieces and scatters them far and wide. Eventually, Isis is able to recover 13 of the pieces, leaving a shrine at every place she found one. The 14th piece, his genitals, was, however, eaten by a fish. Still, Isis manages to reassemble Osiris, and with the help of Anubis and Nephthys, does manage to resurrect him, at which point he becomes the god of the underworld or god of the dead, and takes his place in the heavens as the constellation Orion. At the time, Orion set at sunrise on the winter
repeat
solstice.
That last part again. Sorry. Just like the sentence before putting Orion into the stars, please. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. Still, Isis manages to reassemble Osiris, and with the help of Anubis and Nephthys, does manage to resurrect him, at which point he becomes the god of the underworld or god of the dead, and takes his place in the heavens as the constellation Orion.
Fuck yeah. All right, so let me just really quick, I'm going to stop you right here. I'm just going to pause you. I'm just going to interject real quick, because this story is one of the first Egyptian stories I had heard, right? Because I was always really like obsessed with Osiris. I was like, who is this Osiris character? And why he's so cool, you know? He's got so much history. And he does. He's got a lot of fucking history. Granted, but I just thought it was really funny that there's symbolism there with the number 13, and then there being supposedly 13 and sometimes 12 zodiacal signs. But I was wondering with the number 14 if that was gonna. But look, it said the balls were swallowed by the fish, which is Pisces.
The penis
is the testicles.
Isis is able to recover 13 of the pieces, leaving a shrine at every place she found one. The 14th piece, his genitals.
So I personally thought testicles, and the first thing I thought was Nut is his mom, is the goddess of the sky, the Egyptian goddess of the sky, and so it's like nutless Orion or Osiris. So Orion is Osiris without balls. And go on, please.
Okay. At that time, Orion set at sunrise on the winter solstice, thereby symbolically entering the underworld to be reborn as he rises helically on the summer solstice. Ophiuchus as Isis. There can be little doubt that Ophiuchus is Acephalus. In fact, most sources that recount the myth of Ophiuchus begin by explaining that she was the Greek god Acephalus, then go on to recount his story. But why Asclepius changed names when Zeus made him immortal is not clear. It could be that the constellation he became already had a distinct name and character, Ophiuchus, which is now lost to history. The name change at least seems to allude to the fact that the Greeks simply hijacked a much older myth and retooled it to their own needs. The Ophiuchus, literally in Greek, snake bearer, is Isis also is of little doubt. Both Isis and Asclepius gained notoriety by resurrecting a person struck down by the poison of a scorpion. They both also resurrect the same god under different names, who is to become the constellation Orion. Snakes also feature prominently in stories of the two healing deities, as does the goddess of the moon. In many ways, the Greek myth of Orion and Asclepius seem to be a ragged echo of the tale of Osiris and Isis, filtered through millennia and the politics of place and time. But most compelling to declaring Ophiuchus Isis is Ophiuchus's position in the sky. In most all ancient myths, a point in time, and a solstice or equinox especially, is defined by both the rising and setting constellations. Fittingly, as Orion Osiris dies, sets at sunrise on the winter solstice, Scorpio does rise, but with Ophiuchus on its back, rising heliacally. And as Scorpio dies, when Orion rises heliacally in the summer, Ophiuchus also is setting, driving the scorpion down into the underworld beneath her. In fact, a more accurate observation of the sky belies the fact that Ophiuchus is the true astronomical opposite of Orion, as she is the constellation closest to being 180 degrees away from him. So, saying in myth the opposite of Osiris, Orion, god of the dead, was none other than Isis, goddess of healing or the living. Thus, astronomically as well as mythologically, Isis is certainly Ophiuchus.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Fascinating.
So then, missing Ophiuchus, given the roles of Ophiuchus, Isis, and the scorpion when linked to the tale of the Osiris Orion, it doesn't take much logic to see which sign should be expunged from the zodiac. If indeed one must go, surely that creature which killed Orion and slew the offspring of Osiris should be denigrated the rubbish heap of myth, unworthy of mention. Instead, the Greeks removed Ophiuchus, a goddess of the living who could resurrect the dead, and left in the villain, a mere animal. The only reason for so doing, as stated earlier, seemed to be the origins of Ophiuchus as the powerful and wise Egyptian goddess Isis, the mother, goddess, and protector of Pharaoh, did not sit well with their new patriarchal outlook on the world. We feel she should thus be restored to her former glory, not only to retain the original concept of the 13 constellation zodiac, but also to retain the memory of her and her contributions to humanity.
I'd be interested to talk to David strictly about this exact thing because I mean we go into this, in the latter half of the interview as we start to break down Ophiuchus, but we do it on a more of an actual spiritual path, as opposed to a mythological path. So, but granted, like it's all in there, but we start getting pretty deep and spiritual at the end of this conversation.
For sure, man. Yeah, it's so super interesting. That Ophiuchus would be Osiris because we also often talk about Isis. The loss of the goddess. Yeah, Isis. We often talk about the loss of the goddess and the removal of the 13th zodiac and how 13 applies to the letter M, and the letter M applies to Mary and Mother and all these other things. And we talked about it with the bloodlines and the Templar being executed on the 13th. And how the 13th, Friday the 13th, is a divine feminine day because of Freya, and the 13 is the M, so it's divine. And so it's very interesting that they chose to get rid of this. And it's also the healing, and it's also the female. And that's a lot of the things that we're missing in the world today is all this fakeness with the synthetic healing and bullshit, and big pharma ruling everything, and plants and herbs being demonized as satanic or some stupid fucking shit like that. So it's super interesting that it's part of the stars, man. It's
yes.
It happened in the constellations, happened on the planet. It's a trip, man. It's almost like the planets in the constellations control what plays out in this realm that we live in, which kind of goes into like astrology and that whole belief, that the gods, their places in the sky, control what happens to us here on the planet.
Well, yeah, that's the mythology stories is kind of astrology playing out in a physical sense. If they were to describe energetically what's happening to society through astrotheology or whatever by studying the stars at that time, then it is kind of an interpretation of that. And it's plugged into the story of the stars, the story of the Titans and the gods, but also plugged into on an energetic sense of the human spirit on its journey. And so there's that tie into it all. And it's rather fascinating. What's interesting is that, when we had Micah Dank on talking about astrotheology, and when we have David on now, none of them are, either of them are into actual astrology, through like birthday astrology and stuff like that. So, but it ties in. So I think when you start to look at astrology tied in with astrotheology, they make a lot of sense together, right? And then that makes
sense. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes. It's crazy.
I was going to say it also makes sense that, a lot of these stories that we get are just astrological stories. They held high importance because of whatever happened in the sky was going to happen here. So if you knew what was going to happen in the sky, you could predict what was going to happen on the planet. So they kept these stories around. So that's why, the whole thing with the flamingo guy, Flamenco. Don Flamingo from Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. He talks about the missing 1,000 years because he compares all these things and he gets like the same consistency. But I think it's maybe Flamenco. they're just using these same myths over and over again and using different names in them, and that's kind of becomes the history because that's what we find because they held that in such high importance and so I know it kind of makes me wonder about that, and it makes me wonder about a lot of things, really. But
as it should. That's what all this is for. Is to make us all wonder. Like we don't have the answers, but we're sure as shit finding them out together, baby.
Yeah, man. That's what we're here for. Find this shit out.
Also,
figure
real
it all
quick,
out.
Before we get off the intro here, I want to just shout out to anybody who has any sort of university ability to get books from universities. Let us know. Direct message us, because I'm looking over here on Cambridge University Press, Cambridge Core, the sweet book on magic and fetishism. And I can't look at it because I'm not a member of Cambridge University. So if anybody has any university ties, we want some of these fucking books that you can only be a university member to get. So I just want to throw that out there, trying to be resourceful.
Yeah, and anybody that thinks they want to come on the show or has something cool to say, hit us up too. Or if you think somebody else would be a good guest on this show, let us know. If there's any artists out there that want to do art for shirts for us or talk to us, we can work out a business plan like that. Hit us up about that. Also, the things.
Yeah, baby.
We love you all. Thank you, Fire Tribe, for listening. And here is David Mathisen. Wake up.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into today's show. We are rising from the ashes, and we as the Fire Tribe will rise. Awaken our eyes beyond what is seemingly laid upon us. We can extend our consciousness to the further ends of our cosmic understanding. If you enjoy our show and you like the content that we create, make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends. Hello, everybody. Yes, please do. Also, follow us on Instagram at RFTA Podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, you can email us at risingftashes yahoo.com. We are exclusively on Alt Media United. Check it out, altmediaunited.com/rising from the ashes. We love y'all so much. Thank you for listening to our show. If you find value in the content, make sure to pay it forward so we can keep it going. The grind to find the knowledge and the truth in the seek beyond the veil of our current understanding, to share information. Wake up and rise from the ashes. Wake up.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to
Rising.
From the Ashes. I'm Dan Unaki Dan.
And I am the homie Romy. Hello, everybody, and hello, Dan.
Hello, hello. Today on the show, we have astrotheologist David Mathisen. How you doing, David?
Hey. I'm so nervous. Hey, Dan Roman, it's great to be on the show. Great to be here. Thanks for having me over.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure, man. So give us a little bit of back info on your education and how you got into astrotheology.
Yeah, great. Well, as we were chatting just before we clicked the button to start recording, I'm from California originally, not too far away from where you guys are both sitting. Kind of in between is where I grew up. And when I was still 17 years old, I went off to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. So that's in New York, about 50
Excellent.
miles up the Hudson. Yeah, about 50 miles up the Hudson. So that was 1987. I turned 18 like 3 days after I got there. So
Wow.
Ronald
Must have
Reagan
been
was still
a
the
pretty
president.
great, must have been a pretty
Long
great
time
kid
ago.
to get into there, huh?
Yeah, thanks.
It's a pretty prestigious school. Like you don't get accepted very easily to there.
Yeah, I had, I had some great teachers growing up. I really did. I went to a public school in San Mateo, California, and you have to get teacher recommendations and sports coach recommendations, and you actually have to get a congressman to nominate
Wow.
you. So
Holy crap.
Congressman Tom Lantos, put me on his list to go there, and he's passed away now. But I'm grateful to all the people who helped me go there, and it was I met a lot of really amazing people that I'm still friends with while I was there. And so after you go to the military academy, then you're in the Army for you got a 5-year commitment, at least at the time. I don't know how it's all changed since then. This is obviously a long, long time ago. The Cold War was still going on. And then I was in the infantry. So I became an infantry officer. I went to the 82nd Airborne, which is in North Carolina, and spent a lot of time at Fort Benning, Georgia, which is the home of the infantry. Wow. And I was also stationed in Texas at Fort Hood. And I had the opportunity to go back and teach at West Point. So just to round it out, you asked about education. So I got to go back and teach at West Point, which was a fantastic opportunity. After your first assignments, first you're a platoon leader, then you're a company commander, and then you get to kind of branch out into other things. So I decided I wanted to go back. I had some really fantastic professors at West Point, so I wanted to go back, and they kind of helped me to get back there. And so West Point sent me to Texas A&M for grad school. So I had an opportunity to go there and get a master's degree in literature. And so I was teaching in the Department of English and Philosophy at West Point. So it was really just a great experience. I'm really grateful for that experience. Obviously there's good and bad in everything in the Army. The Army's no different there. Mm-hmm. But what was I going to say about Texas A&M? I mean, that was a great experience too. And I wrote my thesis on Beowulf and Old English literature. Yeah, like the poetry of Old English. And Old English is so different from what we speak as English today. It's not Shakespeare. Shakespeare is like early modern English. There was Middle English before Shakespeare, and you can hardly understand that. That's like Chaucer and Canterbury Tales and stuff. And if you don't have a translated version of that without a lot of educational focus on Middle English, you're not going to be able to read it. And then Old English is even different still. So what we're living in fact, I'll just finish with this thought. We're living the language of English that we speak is like a ruin of 3 or 4 different languages, but they're in collapsed form. So like Old English, the nouns actually inflected. So a stone, if you throw the stone, it'll be stana. It'll have a different ending than if the stone rolls off the hill as the subject of the sentence and hits you in the head, then it's the subject, then it's just stan. And so they changed even the nouns. And we just have a remnant of that with our pronouns. Like if you say, I hit the dog, that's a different pronoun than the dog bit me. You change it. The only place we change it still is in the pronouns, but they used to change it in every single noun. They did all the verb, inflections that changed like Spanish or even more like Greek. They even had a different verb form for if 2 people did something rather than 3 people did something. So it'd be a different verb. Anyway, it's really complicated. And what we have is like a collapsed ruin of all these different languages that feed into English. I could go on and on about it, but
can I ask a question on that really quick?
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's okay. So you have like the Germanic root language, right? Which is where English is stemmed from, Old English, and now what we have from our broken societal language that we have now as English. And then you have, the Latin-based language, and but you have like the Vatican, which is like in the middle of those, right? Like it's kind of like a blend of those languages. Like it's interesting because they are like, in my opinion, kind of like the leaders of some of the New World Order situation that's going on. And just thinking about root language, which is something that we, try to depict a lot of these stories and everything. They have like, it's just fascinating just to trace it all back. But what's your opinion on like the blending of the Germanic and the Latin based languages, and if that question makes any sense at all?
It's a great question. There's some really interesting theories that English was constructed in order to do mind control over you, and like the word you. I've heard some very interesting, although I haven't researched it. So I would say speculative. Maybe there's evidence, but sometimes some things are speculative. But
yes.
For instance, people will say, the word you is calling you a female sheep because a ewe is a female sheep. So every time they say that, it's magic, which magic is, spells.
Germanic seems like it would have some sort of strange occultic ties to it, some sort of weird, ugh.
Yeah, well, and sometimes people think that or say that, well, it's all to enslave you. But actually, an author I like very much, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, wrote a book called The Esoteric Meaning of the Alphabet, or something. It's something similar to that. Esoteric Meaning of the Alphabet. And he gives all these amazing examples and analysis that show that it's really uplifting. It's not, it can be used just like martial arts can be used to bully people or to protect, people from what's bad. I believe that these powerful esoteric systems can be used to uplift or to downpress. So, language is so important, and everything that I'm researching about the myths is arguing that they are using a coded language, an esoteric celestial language of metaphor. And language at its heart is really metaphor. It's metaphor to get an idea from my skull over to your ears and into your processor, how am I going to get that idea there? I have to use tricks. Because it's hard. Even we find that out in the Army, you're like, what are you guys doing up on that hill? I told you to take that hill over there. And no, that's not what you said. You said, and like the message just gets mixed up so easily that we have to use these techniques to try and get it across to someone else. And it's magical if you can even get an idea from one head to another head. But
wow.
Specifically, yeah, we have Old Norse is close, Old Frisian. There's, Old English sounds much more like German, like the Lord's Prayer. I'll say a little bit of the Lord's Prayer in Old English. It starts out Fader Ure. So they rolled their R's, we think, just like they still roll them in Scotland. Mm-hmm. Like in Scotland, they'll still say a kirk. Instead of church, they'll say kirk. Which is the hard kirk.
You're good at
they haven't they haven't palletized it down to a ch. That came later. That was like a lazier way of saying church is like takes less energy to say than kirk. And they'll say garage. Like they'll put the syllable always on the emphasis always on the first, and that's what we did in Old English. But anyway, go ahead. You were going to say something wrong.
I'm going to probably have a lot of these, and I'm going to try to keep myself contained. But I was thinking about when you said it takes less energy to speak this certain way, and thinking about energy is one of the most valuable, precious things that we have. And thinking about like the chakra energy system, and your throat chakra is very important. And then using that muscle in your mouth to speak, and how more connected it will actually make you to use that energy. And maybe that is like some sort of form of societal engineering. Wow, that's fascinating.
That's a great interjection. I'm glad that I paused there, because really the names of the divine were held to be sacred, and those vowel sounds that you would chant, the different temples had different vowels associated with them. In fact, we can touch on like the temple at Delphi. But the language itself, in fact, all the ancient myths around the world are preserved in the form of poetry. It's always in verse. The Iliad and the Odyssey are verse. The cosmogony or theogony of Hesiod of ancient Greece, who's even very ancient. He's talking about creation and the Titans and the Olympians and Gaia and all the kind of early battles of, the first Cyclops. That's all in verse. And this is not just a factor in Greece, it's worldwide. If you go to the Americas, the Popol Vuh, or if you go to, different societies that preserve their sacred stories in the form of oral, it's verse, it's chant, or it's singing. So language is super important. Actually, I kind of wandered into this just by your question of tell me about your educational background. But anyway, what I was going to say, the Lord's Prayer is Fader Ure. You can see that's our Father.
Yeah.
And then it's Thu the art on heavenum. That's thou that are in heaven. How does it go? Thu the art on heavenum. Si vinama yeherchod. Si vin is thine or yours. Nama is name. Si is
Nama in German.
Yeah,
because that's close
si
to the Spanish
Nama.
too. Yama.
Yeah, Yamar. That's right. That's interesting. And si Nama means so thy name. Yeherchod means hallowed or holied. And then it says Tobakuma vin richa. That means thy kingdom come, but they say Tobakuma, which means come, vin, thy, your, richa, which is spelled like rice, but it's pronounced richa. And that means kingdom. That's like Reich in German, right?
Ah.
So it means a kingdom or the Third Reich was actually the Third Empire. There was the Roman Empire, then there was the Holy Roman Empire, and then there was the Third Reich. Anyway, not to get off into conspiracy stuff, but you asked, Roman.
Yeah. No, that's
fantastic. We love that around here, by the way.
Well, I mean, if you don't believe in conspiracy stories, you better start like Jeffrey Rush says in Pirates of the Caribbean. You best start believing in ghost stories because you're in one.
Yeah, because you're in one. Wow.
So anyway, that was what I was studying, and then I got an opportunity to go back and teach at West Point, which was fantastic. And so here I am today. That was a long time ago, actually, gentlemen. That was a long time ago.
I heard a show with you, and you said that you grew up kind of in the Bible, studying the Bible on Sundays and stuff, and reading a lot of the Bible. And then your dad took you to go see the stars and everything, and was showing you like astrology or astronomy, I guess, more so, not astrology. And then you kind of like ended up putting those kind of things together later in life. And it's always so interesting, kind of the things that happen to us early in our life kind of sets the stage for, our future or our destiny later on in life. And so, yeah, if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be awesome too.
Yeah, thanks for listening to some of my other stuff. And all my podcasts are in an archive, or all the ones that are still available, or most of the ones that are still available are in an archive on my website. So I'll put this one in there too.
Excellent. Sweet.
So people can check it out in the future. But yeah, you got it pretty right. I didn't really go to church regularly growing up. We did go to church, but it was more casual or more, it wasn't strict. I was not brought up in a strict literalist kind of upbringing growing up in California that you might, there are people all over the country that are deeply influenced by that. But it was really in the Army that I became much more aggressive, strict, virulent about my, I really kind of dove into Christianity. And it was as a result of a few things, questioning things about myself, like why am I so messed up? Why do I say those kinds of things to my girlfriend, even when I don't want to, or, things like that, like what's wrong with me? And
important questions to ask.
Yeah. And so I was searching like a lot of people are.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say even going to West Point is a kind of a searching, kind of signing up for a pretty intense program like that. And I continued signing up for more intense programs, like Ranger School and things like that. But because you're looking for something actually inside yourself. And it's the same thing, I believe, that people, when they turn to the ancient wisdom of any tradition, they're looking for something. And I was looking for something. And so I dove really hard into literalist Christianity, became basically like a born again. I got baptized again, even though I was baptized as an infant, that kind of thing, like as an adult in the Army. And the Army has chaplains. And, at the time I was wrestling with all these things. I was in the 82nd Airborne. So I was jumping out one side of the airplane. For a while, I was the officer who jumps out first, the personnel officer for the battalion, to make sure that you find everybody after the jump, because they're jumping at night. You got to get accountability that everybody went, who's still on the plane, who's missing, who might be hanging in the trees somewhere that you got to go find. The chaplain would jump out the other door first. So it was my position in the battalion, jumped out one door first, and the chaplain jumped out the other door first, because the chaplain had to get there if someone was mortally wounded on a jump to assist them, in their transition to the next world. That's the idea. So he and I were always jumping at the same time. We were in the same kind of, so I was talking to him about all these issues, and, he said, well, you have to understand this, and, help me out with a lot of a lot of things, but basically I became a literalist Christian and became, even more and more severe as I went along. But over time, after I got out of the Army is when I really started to encounter the connections between the myths and the stars. So I had already, as you said, Dan, I had already loved the stars from when I was a child. I'd already loved the myths from when I was a child. And I didn't have any problem loving the myths, but believing that, the Bible is true and all these other myths are myths. But later, after I got out of the Army, I encountered the work of Graham Hancock, whom you guys may know of. Graham Hancock.
Oh, yes.
Of course.
And, and
he's on the Pantheon.
He wrote a book. Well, for sure. He's just a towering, intellect and voice.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book called Heaven's Mirror, which is the first one that I encountered. And then Fingerprints of the Gods. He references this book by these two professors who have passed away back in the 70s, actually. It's called Hamlet's Mill. And that was a real eye-opener because, like I said, I already love the myths, I already love the stars. And they're saying there's some kind of ancient system around the world. It's in ruins. It's this giant system that's even found in the Americas, the Pacific Islands, and they all are tied together somehow. Myth and number and fairy tales and architecture, all these things are parts of this gigantic ancient system, but now the system is in ruins. Well, I was just fascinated by that. And they connect it to the stars, especially the myths. And I was very open to that. But when they connected the Bible to the stars, I was like, no, that's not based on the stars. But the more since I already knew so much about the Bible, because I was really, as you said, Dan, I was just reading the Bible on Sundays. Like that's, after a while I became very, very strict with it. On Sundays, I would only read either the Bible or commentaries on the Bible. I wouldn't watch the NFL even, I wouldn't, or even let my kids watch the NFL. So
good.
But the more I dug into their arguments, they only kind of talk about the Bible a little bit, but the more I dug into it, I was like, there seems to be a pretty good argument that these stories are based on the stars. And I just became fascinated. And the more I started to kind of decipher it like a language, like learning another language. And it sounds like, Dan, maybe you speak another language as well. I don't know if you speak Spanish or no. Okay.
Well, I grew up in California. That's how I know Spanish.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, it's like, that means this. Okay. But sometimes it can mean this too. It's, it's not easy.
Yeah. It's very complicated.
But I just, as you could already tell by what I chose to study, I'm already fascinated by language and connections. And it was like, here's a whole nother language and it's really important to me because I got to figure out, is the Bible based on the stars or is it literal or could it be both or what does this mean? Anyway, it's like pulling on a thread that just keeps going and pretty soon the whole sweater unravels. Or like Gandalf said about the dwarves at Moria, they dug too deep and they woke something else up down there. Yeah. So I dug too deep into the Bible and my whole picture of literalism that I was basing my life around. I had to realize, okay, there's something I was missing. So the literal understanding of the Bible, I now believe, inverts the meaning. But actually all the truth and the beauty that you were looking for in the Bible, which I was, is still there. Yeah. The good aspects of it are still there, but there's literalism inverts so much of the message, that all the bad things basically that we think of as associated with, the idea that my faith is right and everyone else is wrong. That comes from a literalistic understanding. Once you actually understand it, you realize the Bible is based on the exact same system as the Maya Popol Vuh, as the Norse myths, as the Greek myths. Ancient India, yes, exactly. All the way around the world, China, Australia, Africa, the sacred traditions of the Americas, all the different nations of North America, they are all using a celestial metaphor system that is the same system around the world that actually unites everybody. But literalism tends to divide everybody. Like, oh, I've got it right and nobody else does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an issue.
Those are the walls that we're trying to break down around here. We're not saying that any one religion is right and that what you believe is wrong, but just understand that you're one and the same with everybody else, and not to judge them or not to fear them. That's what's dividing us apart, and we need to come together so you can have your own belief system without having to hate on other people's belief systems.
Yeah, very well said. And I think it's a beautiful, I was at first very resistant to this idea, but I have some quotations that over the years I've latched onto that I like very much. And one of them, again, by Alvin Boyd Kuhn, his last name is spelled Kuhn, Alvin Boyd Kuhn. He lived from, I think, 1880 to 1963, or it might be 1885 to 1963, Alvin Boyd Kuhn. But he said, the sacred scriptures of the world are 1,000 times more precious as myths than as alleged history. And I really believe that they are. This is absolutely an ancient treasure that was given to all the different cultures of the world. These sacred traditions that they have, they were given for a positive purpose. I know there are some people who believe that, this is all to enslave humanity and get them to, dig gold for the Anunnaki, right, Dan? All to get you to be enslaved. But actually, I don't see it that way. And I've wrestled with that and come up with the evidence that I believe shows that it's actually for the benefit of men and women. But it can absolutely be twisted and used for the harm of men and women, just like really good psychology should be for healing people. But you could use, if you know psychology really well, you could use it to sell toothpaste. Not that that's harmful, but you could use it to also mess people up. You could use it for psychological warfare. Okay, how are we going to demoralize the people that we're categorizing as the enemy? How are we going to break them down using, let's get the best psychologists we can and really terrify people or really traumatize people. That's horrific, but that's how good things can be used to harm people too.
Washington must have a politician on staff, or Washington must have a philosopher on staff. Yeah.
I think, that's the thing is, there's deep philosophies that are, tied back to the ancient ways that our government, though it seems modern, and it is modern, obviously, right? It exists now. But they tie all of the foundations of everything that we know here in modern world to ancient philosophies. And it's just, I think at the base level, there's not a lot of that understanding, but the higher up you go, you have ties to, Skull and Bones and these more occultic, societies or what have you, and they run on ancient philosophies. So I think there's always the philosophers there in the government, like you said, Dan. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, as we're sitting here today, looking out at the world that we're living in and trying to figure out what is going on, it is quite clear that the ancient myths are still alive and well, right? I don't know if you guys know Christopher Knowles. He is fantastic at laying out and examining and showing that. And also Scott Onstott. I don't know if you know Scott Onstott. He made a video called Secrets in Plain Sight, where he shows the layout of cities, Washington, D.C., around the world. It's like a 2-hour video that's got literally 10 million views or something. I mean, it's been around for a little while, but it's literally got multiple millions of views.
What's that video called?
Secrets in Plain Sight.
Nice.
Secrets in Plain Sight by Scott Onstott. So it's quite clear that like ancient knowledge is continued to be used. And, yeah, you mentioned like Skull and Bones and things like that.
That was the only reference I had at the top at the time.
No, I mean, not to dive too far into all that kind of thing, but it's quite clear that the government is not always doing what is best for the people, right?
Yeah.
But it should be. But it can be hijacked. It can be hijacked by and so why would people still be using ancient myths? Well, I'll tell you, this is the thought that I had that I wanted to the point that I wanted to make off of what you said, Roman, was because the ancient myths are talking about us. It's like the makeup of a human being, of a man or a woman, in your brain, the things that in your personality,
psyche,
your psyche,
collective consciousness,
all that knowledge that is in the myths is true about us. It's as true and applicable to us today as it was in 3000 BC or any other year.
Wow.
And so that is true knowledge and true wisdom, and you can use it for the benefit of the people, or you can use it for the enrichment of small groups, of oligarchs. It can be used either way. I am convinced that it was intended for positive usage, and I can point to stories that show that. For instance, the stories where a king will often be asked by a god, "Ask me anything." It's like an AMA. Ask me anything. Ask me for anything. Ask me for whatever you want. Like you've heard of the story of King Midas, right? King Midas was the richest king already. He was already rich. And the god Dionysus, in most versions of the story, asked him, "Midas, what do you want? I'll give you whatever you want." And why would he even do that? Well, it was a reward. Midas had rescued his friend. Dionysus was the god of wine, and he was always having a party basically every single night. And one of his friends was a satyr named Silenus. A satyr has like goat feet, from the hips down, and likes to drink a lot and also likes to do, wild partying all the time. Satyrs are kind of like always wanting to have sex. I mean, they're like everything you would think of as a wild party. That's what satyrs were all about. Anyway, Silenus wandered off. He was drunk, wandered off, and got captured by some people captured him because he was like dead drunk, stone dead drunk, lying down by a well of water. And so he got captured. But Midas was like, "Hey, wait a minute. Let's entertain him. Let's treat him with good hospitality. Let's return him to Dionysus. I know this is Silenus, the friend of Dionysus." So he returns Silenus to Dionysus and says, "Hey, we found your buddy. He was drunk. We took care of him. Instead of, humiliating him, we treated him well with good hospitality." And Dionysus says, "Thank you so much, Midas. I will grant you whatever you want." Well, that myth is found around the world of someone being asked, "What do you want? Name what you want." And Midas, of course, he was already rich. He apparently had some good qualities. He treated Silenus with dignity instead of, making fun of him or whatever. And, but he had a problem. He was the richest man in the world, but he couldn't get enough. And he said, "I know what I want. I want everything I touch to turn to gold." And Dionysus says, "Are you sure you want that? You got to be careful what you ask for." "Okay, your wish is granted." And it turned out to be a disaster. And that's actually like a picture of addiction, right? It's like you can't get enough, and it satisfies you less and less the more you get. Well, pretty soon Midas realized that the more gold he got, the less satisfied he was, because he couldn't even take a bite of food or a sip of drink without it turning to gold.
Yeah, man.
And then he turns his own daughter into gold when she comes running up and to give him a hug. And he's like, "Oh, this is a curse. This isn't a blessing." So that pattern is around the world of ask the divine for what you want. And in the Bible, Solomon is also asked, what do you want? And it's in 1 Kings chapter 3. And he says, well, I've been put in charge of this whole nation. This whole nation is looking to me for judgment. They come to me to ask which course of action is right, to settle their disputes and their arguments. And a lot of times it's hard to tell which side is right. And I feel like a little child sometimes. I've got like imposter syndrome. I'm the king, but I feel like a little kid trying to be the king. And I just feel that I need wisdom in order to judge rightly of this so great of a nation that you've put me in charge of. So would you please give me wisdom in order to judge rightly and help the people? And the Bible says that was the answer that pleased the Lord. He said, you didn't ask for gold. You didn't ask for long life. You didn't ask for the life of your enemies. So that implies you could have asked for all those things. You could have asked, I want you to kill this particular guy and that particular guy and that. I mean, that was an answer that he didn't choose. He chose wisdom, but not just wisdom to be, so everyone will think I'm cool. He said, I need wisdom to judge rightly in order to help others. And God says to him, that's the right answer. You didn't ask for long life, but I'm going to give you that. You didn't ask for riches. I'm going to give you that too, because you asked for wisdom to help the people. So to me, these stories are saying you can go to the divine realm to ask for lots of different things. You can use it to even harm others. You can even use it to, destroy your enemies. But that's not the true best purpose. The best purpose is to get wisdom in order to make the right judgments, in order to help people and build up the nation. And so that to me is an example, one of the best examples that the myths are actually there to give you wisdom, to help others, to build up the nation. But it can also be used for all these other not as good things. And Midas learned that when you choose the wrong thing, and why did Midas choose that? Because he had an empty spot inside of him that he was trying to fill with gold, and he's never going to fill it that way. He's never going to.
Greed.
Yeah, very greedy. It's terrible. That kind of led into my first question kind of note that I had was like, how does astrotheology fit into the current modern paradigm? And that definitely sums it up a little bit. But it's obviously very, very deep and beautiful. But does astrotheology, can you use it to predict anything? Like I know that a lot of these old calendars were tied to predictions, celestial predictions. Does that tie into the myths as well? Were they using myths and the celestial calendars to tie these predictions in together? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like to kind of tackle it in the order that you asked it. So at first you said, how does astrotheology apply to daily life? And you continued on to what I would call divination, or, getting answers, or
Prophecy.
Predicting, as you said, prophecy. And all the ancient myths have discussions of divination, including the Bible. There's divination in the Bible of using different sticks or lots, casting lots and things like that, which is very similar to how the I Ching uses yarrow stalks, which is a type of a plant reed to divine. And in cultures around the world, they still, if you go into a temple in Taiwan today, for instance, you can get some different kind of half moon shaped pieces of metal and cast them down on the floor, and the way they fall will give you an answer of either yes, no, or you get kind of actually what they call a smirk, which is like the gods are just smiling in a kind of a smirking way. That's your answer. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, that's divination. Okay, so astrotheology specifically how does it apply to us today? As I said, when I started to see that the Bible was also based on the stars, I was fine seeing that the myths were based on the stars, but when I really started to realize that the Bible is all based on the stars, and we can talk about what that means. What does it mean when I say based on the stars? I mean, the characters in the Bible are related to specific constellations. Moses crossing the Red Sea can be seen in the heavens. The Adam and Eve story can be seen in the heavens, and there's specific references in the text that point to specific constellations, to where the more I dove into it, the more I realized the characters themselves are based on the constellations. It's not that it was a literal person, man or woman, who did that. It is all based on stars. So it's all metaphor. So I had to wrestle with, what does it mean then? If that's the case, what does it mean? Does that mean it's not true? People will say, wait a minute, are you telling me that the story of Moses isn't true? No, I'm not saying that. It's profoundly full of truth, but it's not literal history. It's not literal parting the Red Sea, literally parting the Red Sea. That can be seen in the heavens. So if that's the case, then it must mean something else. What does it mean? Then
Mercury or Mars or something red. I'm not sure.
The Red Sea. Yeah, well, actually,
Milky Way.
There you go. That's it. Dan's right. I mean, I would argue that's the answer. So the Milky Way has a dark rift across it, a dark rift that goes right across the Milky Way, and it's right next to, right above the galactic core. That some cultures call it the birth canal.
Galactic vagina. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the birth canal. It's also called the Dark Rift. That's an official name of it, the Dark Rift. It could be a game. I didn't know you were a hardcore gamer, but you could make a cool game. Dark Rift, massively multiple.
Wow.
Going into the Dark Rift. But right next to the Dark Rift, there is a constellation. There's a constellation that is holding out a staff or a rod towards that exact pathway.
That's amazing.
So people might say, well, okay.
What constellation is that?
It's called Ophiuchus.
Shit. Okay.
The serpent and the pole.
Yes.
Right? Moses had the serpent's staff.
That's right.
Oh.
That's right.
You did a whole video on it, and I have it in my notes for later. So I don't know. Did you want to go in on Ophiuchus?
So let's super cute. Well, let me try and answer your question, and I'll just mention that Ophiuchus. No, it's great. Because this ties into your answer of your question, is what does it mean? What's its point for us today? Just to summarize, I'm convinced that what these ancient myths are showing, and they're profound, they're multi-layered. So when I say they're about this is one thing that they're about, is a central theme that's running through the myths around the world. Is it the central theme? I don't say that. I say it's definitely one of the central themes, is reconnecting with self, who you really are. Like I said at the beginning when I was talking about, I dove deeper and deeper into the Bible because I was like, what's wrong with me? Or I was looking for an answer. Or even by going to West Point and searching out these kind of more and more intense experiences. I was on the parachute team at West Point. So I was skydiving every day. But not only that, I was sometimes pulling low. Like I would get yelled at by the coaches, like, Mathisen, you pull low like that one more time, you're going to be off the team. It was like adrenaline addiction kind of.
What does that mean, pulling low?
That means waiting to open your parachute. You're free falling, right? You're jumping out at 10,500 feet, and you're supposed to, it depends on how experienced you are, but you're supposed to pull by 2,000 feet if you have a C license, or 1,500 feet if you have a D license, things like that. And D license, you have to have a certain number of jumps. I have a D license now, but you're not allowed to go below, you're not allowed to free fall below a certain height, or your parachute might not open in time before you hit the ground. So pulling low is like riding it longer and longer on the free fall part and deploying your chute later. And like, have you seen Point Break, where they pull they pull their parachute, and like as soon as the parachute deploys, they hit the water in that one scene. It's over Lake Elsinore in California, actually.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's in the first Point Break. I'm talking about 1991. Well, this was, I was doing this before Point Break came out, but it's exactly what they're talking about in Point Break is exactly
How do you know what feet level you're at when you're falling?
You have an altimeter. So you have an altimeter on your chest that shows that tells how high you are. But a good skydiver will always tell you you've got at least 3 altimeters. You got the one on your chest, and you got 2 altimeters in your head. And you better figure out. You better every time you're riding up to altitude. Yeah, every time you're in an airplane going up above 5,000 feet or whatever, as you cross through 5,000 feet, you look down and say, okay, that's how big the cars look at 5,000 feet. Okay, that's what the streets look like at 6,000 feet. So you learn so that if your altimeter breaks while you're free falling, you've got to know, okay, just by my eyeballs, I know I'm low enough to where I got to pull at this point. Pull means pull your drone chute out and deploy your parachute. Anyway, or your pilot chute, they call it, not your drone chute. That's something different. Anyway, it's been a long time. I'm digging up. You guys are dredging up memories here. But I was searching for something. We're all actually searching for something, and what that something is, the myths are pointing to the fact that we have actually suppressed who we are, where we've become divided from who we are, and we don't even know it. And that's why we need the myths to show us, and they point us towards recovery of that authentic self that becomes suppressed as part of society and fitting in with other people and psychological things like trauma and what's called attachment injury, where, your parents, even if they're trying their very best, they can sometimes make you feel like let you down in some way, or make you feel like they don't like you at a certain moment, and you suppress that. You turn it inwards as, my father, whom I love, said something really cruel to me, or did something, and you turn it inwards like, okay, I better improve myself. I better fix that part of me in order to not let that happen again. And you start to suppress part of who you are. And it may be that he just had a bad day at work, or maybe he had to go off to work and you felt abandoned, but he wasn't there for you when you needed him, and you felt abandoned, but you turned it into something's wrong with me, and you start to try and suppress certain parts of you. I'm kind of making a hash of this explanation now, but that's what the myths are actually about, is recovery of that authentic part of you that you suppressed. And that is so applicable to us today, because all of addiction is like Midas's addiction was because he had some kind of like a need. He was trying to assuage that split. I mean, he's a metaphorical person, but he's representative of addiction. You're trying to
fill that void.
Yeah, you're trying to soothe that pain of that split from yourself with pouring alcohol on it, or pouring gold on it, in Midas's case, or pouring, sex or whatever. You can become addicted to anything. I'm not saying that alcohol is a bad thing. Those are good things, but you can use it. If you become addicted to it, it's because you are trying to actually put out an ache of some very a deeper split of actually split from yourself. And the myths are pointing us towards how we can first become aware of that, because you do it unconsciously. It's so insidious. It's so, the pain is so great that you actually will deny that you're doing that to yourself, because you don't want to even admit, no, I had a perfect childhood. No, I never felt that. So the myths are there to wake you up to, this actually happened, and all these different behaviors that you're doing are because of it. And the only one that can heal it is actually that self that you've been suppressing all this time. So that's what the myths are about. So that's a long answer to what is their applicability today. I mean, if you see addiction in our society, which is going through the roof, depression, anxiety, all those things are going through the roof. It's because of those things that the myths are dealing with. And so just to quickly tie it back to your question about divination, I am quite convinced is pointing us back to yourself as well. So if you're using a tarot card, or if you're using the runes, or if you're using the I Ching, what it's actually doing is pointing you towards your own self, is saying, here's an answer. Now you have to wrestle with that answer and figure out what it means to you. And the more you can reconnect with self, the more you're going to get the right answer. The more you're going to get the divination. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's tied together. I mean, I tried to tie my answer together. It's kind of a complex. Absolutely. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So, that's why we have these allotted hours of going deep on this stuff, because it's not, none of this is easily explained or easily understood or easily defined, and that's a beautiful part of, coming together as a community, and why we appreciate having you.
Yeah. Thank you for, the questions that you guys ask can be different than anyone else's questions. It'll bring out different facets of, we're all like standing around this amazing world that we're in, looking at it from different angles, trying to go, what
like, for instance,
does this mean?
Oh man. I'll save that for later. I'm gonna ask you some flat questions.
I wanted to
some southern hemisphere type questions, but I'll save that for later.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I was interested in is
what's a flat question? Now I got it. Okay.
Yeah, flat.
I'm a little slow.
Yeah,
slow. Okay, I got it.
Is there a star myth about the Immaculate Conception?
Oh
yeah.
Oh,
and
come on.
What is that star myth? And
wow,
what constellations does that involve?
All right. Great question, Dan. So, Immaculate Conceptions are found in myths around the world. You've probably heard, I'm not the first person to say that by any means.
Yeah.
It's completely, the more myths you study, the more it will hit you over the head. So when we say Immaculate Conception, of course, we're talking about Jesus and Mary, Mary's Immaculate Conception, and Jesus, the Son of Mary, a virgin birth. This is a pattern around the world. We see it in, the Buddha, the story of the Buddha. And I've done a video actually about it called Life of the Buddha, Life of the Christ, I believe is the name of the video. It's on my YouTube channel, which you can get to all that stuff off of my website or off of my Instagram. Life of the Buddha, Birth of the Buddha, Birth of the Christ. That's what that video was called. So the Buddha's mother has a dream. Her name is Queen Maya. She has a dream of a white elephant, and the elephant enters her side. And the next morning she says, "Oh, I'm pregnant." She tells her husband, I'm pregnant. And it's a divine Immaculate Conception. That's just one. And the stories of Buddha, all scholars agree were around long before the alleged time of Jesus. Okay. Mm-hmm. I believe that Jesus is metaphorical, just like all the others. Metaphorical, that doesn't mean not true. It means not literal, not historical, but metaphorical, Gnostic in a sense.
Energetic
to teach you something else. So, but I'll just give a few more examples. In the myths of ancient Greece, Perseus, for instance, is also an Immaculate Conception. There's a king who is given an oracle. To your point, Roman, the oracles, will speak in sometimes mysterious ways, and they'll tell you the will of the gods. And in this oracle, this king was told, you're going to have a daughter, and she will have a son one day who will kill you and take over your kingdom. And he says, oh, I don't really like that. Okay, well, when my daughter gets old enough to have kids, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to prevent her from having kids. And the way I'm going to do is I'm going to build a underground chamber made out of bronze, in some cases, or made out of stone, whatever. She's going to go down into that underground chamber. My servants will bring her food and drink, and then she'll be locked in there, and that way no man can ever sleep with her, no matter how beautiful she is. And I won't have a grandson who kills me because I don't want that. I'm going to stop the will of the gods. So she's in there, and the servants, bring her food and drink. She's very beautiful. Her name is Danae, or Danae, Danae. Danae, and she's in there in the stone box. And one day the god Zeus says, "That is the most beautiful woman. I've just got to sleep with her." He's always
Zeus be
falling in love with mortal women. And he says, "How am I going to do this?" Her father's got this plan that no one will ever get to sleep with her, but I'm the god Zeus, and I can do whatever I want. And she's got like air holes in the top of the stone chamber, for the air to come in. And so he turns himself actually into a shower of gold. That's the actual myth. And there's ancient depictions of it. Yep. Yeah, there's ancient depictions of it. All right. Keep your focus here, Dan.
You said
it. The ancient myths said it. Anyway, he goes down through the air holes. He rains down onto Danae, and she becomes pregnant.
Wow.
That's another virgin. It's a virgin birth. And her child is Perseus, who goes eventually to fight Medusa and the Gorgons.
But it's virgin because it's from a god and not a physical.
It's from a god and not a, that's right. It's a divine. Okay. Also Hercules.
Fascinating.
Hercules or Heracles. So another pattern in ancient Greece is that there will be twins. One child is the son of Zeus and one child is a mortal twin. Okay, so Hercules is that way. The mother of Heracles is the Greek word for Hercules, the Greek name of Hercules, and we know it mostly through the Roman name Hercules. But Hercules' mother was a queen. She's very beautiful. Zeus says, I got to sleep with her, and he does. But he makes sure that the king also later on comes in and sleeps with her so that there's no suspicion of the queen. So when she's pregnant, 9 months later, the king doesn't have any suspicion. So actually the twins will be, one child will be the son of Zeus, and that's Heracles, and one child will be the son of the king, and that is Iphicles. And so you have a divine, one child is actually the son of a god and a mortal woman, and one child is the son of a mortal king and a mortal queen. And that's the same thing with Castor and Pollux, the twins of Gemini. They're also, Castor is the mortal son. It was the queen of Sparta in that case, and Zeus turned himself into a swan.
Swan.
Yeah.
Quit looking at me, swan.
Well, yeah, that's right. And the swan is a constellation as well. Okay.
These are do you think these stories are more about the ego and the self and telling your separation of your divinity is really within yourself and not to this higher power extent?
100%. So the message is, what's the message? So there's two births. There's two births. Yeah. One birth is divine. It's not physical. Okay. And one birth is mortal. It is physical. Okay. So the twins, one child is a divine. It's a combination of physical, mortal, and divine. And the other twin is mortal. So it's not actually the twins aren't two different people.
Can they interchange?
To your point.
They swap back and forth at all?
Well, that's exactly what they do, Roman.
It's like Jesus and whatever his name is.
You're thinking of Barabbas, probably.
Yeah,
Barabbas.
Yeah.
Barabbas. It's actually Jesus and someone else, but that's a good thought. Yes. So, but to your point of, could this have to do with the ego or the us? The twins are not two different people. It's actually describing the situation of every man and woman on this planet, is that you have you have a physical birth, but there's also a divine
Hermetic.
birth. It's not the normal birth. Yes, it's a spiritual birth, and that's a picture of higher self. So the divine twin, you have a divine twin, and it's able to do things that you can't even believe it can do.
Yeah.
That's your higher self.
That's your imagination, your creativity, your brain, your sleep REM, dream realm. Goodness, like, wow.
I got a question for you with that. In that topic right there, in the Bible, we see a lot of firstborn child being dead, and the second one inheriting. This is like with the Esau story.
Yep.
I think it's like Jason and the Argonauts, right? With the golden fleece. It's the first one always dies off and the second one rises. Do you think this is like sort of the same tale? It's not really talking about brothers. It's talking about a mortal self and a higher self, and the higher self going on to be the ruler.
That's right. It's talking about your first birth and your second birth, or it's talking about you have a higher self that's the one that you should be focusing on.
Yeah.
That's the one that you should be trying to get back to.
Taking everything literally, it just butchers it. It completely butchers the depth of it. That's, because you just stop right there. When you take something so literally, you stop for what it is. It's there, you're done, but when you, it's just fascinating. I'm sorry. I'm going to shut up.
No, that's great. No, you guys are both I can sit here and make a video by myself and talk about stuff, and, that's great. But interacting with other people who have their own life experiences and their own perspectives throws off sparks that are different than just me sitting here talking to a microphone. So that's, you guys are bringing out aspects of things that are really important. And that's what all your listeners are depending on you to ask, questions.
Oh, goodness.
They're yelling at the microphone. Like, what about this?
Man. Astrologically, what signs are these in the sky that are depicting this immaculate conception? Obviously, we have Virgo.
Yeah, that's right. So Dan, you're on it. So Virgo is in the sky, a constellation that is known as Virgo, the Virgin. So the Virgin, the constellation itself, and a lot of podcasts I do show outlines, I put up, but I really like just talking too. I love that we're just doing an audio because, I spend all this time preparing a presentation when it's visual, and then we kind of go in that direction because it's kind of already laid out. So here we can kind of go wherever, but people have to envision it in their mind. But they can check out my books and podcasts and blogs where I talk about and show this. But the constellation Virgo, the outline itself is a female outline. But I will caution that all the different constellations take on the role of male or female characters in different myths. It's not that Virgo is only ever a female character.
She's also a Star Wars fan. Urgent.
Yeah,
Sorry.
what I get it, but come on, Star Wars fans are
Bad jokes for days over here, man.
No offense to Conspiracy Kyle, we love you.
Star Wars fans meet girls too. Come on, man. Virgo, the way the constellation looks, the constellation actually goes across the sky on its back with its legs elevated and raised. In the northern hemisphere perspective, depends on where you are on the disc, right? Where the projection is on your flat dome. It's not flat, guys. But
does that have anything to do with the moon and because there's a kind of a cool project going on with Benjamin Balderson, and he talks about the Hermetic principles of feminine, masculine, alchemical alchemical cosmology, and that the moon is actually masculine energy, and when it's fully erect is when it like ejects the massive amount of secretion energetically. So I was wondering, I was like, oh, immaculate conception, moon, full moon, line up. I have no idea.
Yeah, well, I don't know about
Dabbing in the dark.
since I haven't studied his theories, but I thought you were going to say, does it have anything to do with the moon? Because there's a passage in Revelation 12 where it says, "And the moon was at her feet. I saw a woman in travail meaning in labor, getting ready to give birth.
Oh,
and the moon was at her feet, and the crown of stars at her head, or stars." Anyway, I thought that's where you were going. So, but yeah, look, the planets in the heavens, including the moon, have an impact on us on Earth. Like, why wouldn't they, or how could they not?
yeah.
The tides, anyone who surfs knows that the tides are influenced by the moon and the sun. They're influenced by both, but the moon has an impact, like a visible impact on Earth. And it does actually have it. The reason it's associated with feminine energy is it has traditionally and for millennia been associated with the woman's monthly cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had all these modern scientists coming out and saying, "Oh, no, that's a bunch of BS. That's old wives' tales, blah, 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 blah." And they did studies, and the studies have shown, yep, there is a connection. It's not like 100% super direct correlation.
Exactly
but
the same as the cycle.
There's enough correlation.
Well, the thing about it is, in my head, is like it's correlated to them, and they're attracted to it because it is masculine, and because it is that's the time that they are the most fertile for getting pregnant is during that time. So it lines up with the full, bloomage of the erect male, as the moon as the penis, basically, right? And it's monthly secretion. And so like it lines up with the women. And I'm sure outside of humans, it also lines up to a lot of, the way that the trees would even have their pollen drift off, and the way that nature works harmoniously and completely synchronizes with itself. Like outside of human understanding, everything is connected to the moon and the stars and is affected. Absolutely.
Isn't
no
it
doubt.
A plant that only blooms in the moonlight?
Probably. That sounds amazing.
I think there is, yeah.
I don't actually know. I mean, all that stuff's interesting. It's not, it's not something I'm going to
speculate on.
Yeah. I haven't really dug into it, but there is no doubt in my mind that we are impacted by cycles, and we're connected to nature, and we're connected to the universe. And there's a trauma psychologist, a pioneer of this concept of trauma in psychology, which is really, it's the cutting edge psychologists who are really talking about this. And his name is Dr. Peter Levine. And he writes in one of his books that trauma, in short, is disconnection from ourself, but also disconnection from our families, from others, from nature. So trauma is disconnection from yourself, and that disconnects us from the universe. We're really connected to it, but we don't perceive the connection. When we're disconnected even from ourselves, how can we even perceive that we're connected to other people, let alone the universe? But we really are. But when we're disconnected from ourselves, we don't see that connection, which is a true connection. That connection is absolutely there. But the more we're traumatized, the less we perceive that connection or can make use of that connection. But anyway,
I'm a cry.
Just to bring us back to Virgo, she goes across the sky on her back with her legs elevated and raised, which is the position of a woman giving birth. I mean, if you've ever been at birth, she puts her feet up on the petals, and that's how. And so there is a constellation where she can be envisioned as giving birth to a few different constellations that are basically arranged near the feet of Virgo. And the constellation that Jesus is connected with is just to the, it looks, you could draw a little curved arrow coming right out from between her legs and going to the constellation that Jesus is connected with. And it's right next to Virgo. So that's the virgin birth. And it's Ophiuchus, Roman. I see you looking up in the air.
That's
going,
it's fascinating.
I thought is there a connection with Draco?
Well, so Draco or however it's pronounced is a very northern constellation. It's way up around the North Pole, the North Celestial Pole in the sky. And it does play a role in some myths, for sure.
Okay.
But and it's actually arranged over the head of Ophiuchus. So there are some stories where a figure will be bound and have a serpent put over its head to drip venom down onto him. I'm thinking of a specific punishment for a Norse god. Do you know who got bound and had venom dripped over his head?
Oh, it's not Odin.
Not Odin. Yeah, he Odin like bound
Ragnar?
himself. No, not Ragnar. That's a good guess. But this god is in the story. Which god would all the other gods be pissed off at?
Loki.
There you go. So Loki gets bound. They get so mad at him. He does something that's so horrific that finally they just tie him up. They chain him up to a rock and put a venomous serpent over his head, and the serpent drips down poison onto his head. And I think that's likely Draco dripping down over his head. But in terms of the virgin birth, the constellation Hydra is a serpent that goes directly underneath Virgo. It's kind of sinuous, long constellation. It's right next to Virgo, but it's south of Virgo, not towards the North Pole. It's on the other side of Virgo. Draco is way up by the North Pole.
There's so much serpent, dragon, big reptilian, like even like if dinosaurs did or did not exist, which is completely random, I know, but there's so much. We are fascinated with it. We're fascinated with big snakes. We're fascinated with reptiles and there being a connection to reptile people. And then through all of these mythologies, there's so much symbolism. And I'm just like, what? And I guess, with other animals as well, but dragons and serpents is just huge everywhere in all myths across the world.
Yeah,
For
this
sure.
would get into my next question of the killing of the Midgard serpent. Thor killing the Midgard serpent, Archangel Michael killing the serpent. There's lots of symbolisms of killing the serpent. Is there a star mist associated with
Ophiuchus,
the death of the serpent?
Yeah, for sure. Great questions. These are great questions. I really appreciate you guys. You came prepared with some good, thoughtful questions. So as you're saying, Dan, that is a motif in myth around the world. It's an oikotype, even we could say an oikotype.
Oikotype.
Yes.
Is that like
Oikotype.
the oikotarian?
I don't know what oikotarian is, but
okay. We heard that
actually,
from. Oh man, I feel bad for even forgetting.
Oh, what a jerk!
I know.
No, that's interesting. I haven't heard the word. I'll have to check it out. I got to listen to more of your shows then, so I can. But an oikotype is a myth pattern. It's actually a word from botany, and there was a mythologist or a folklorist whose name was Carl Wilhelm von Sydow. I'm pretty sure von Sydow, and he's actually the father of a famous actor named Max von Sydow. Have you heard of Max von Sydow? Yeah, you have. I'm pronouncing it.
Okay.
I'm pronouncing it the way.
Yes,
I'm
I
pronouncing
remember
it the
now.
way I think it's pronounced. It's spelled von Sydow or von Sydow, Sydow. Have you guys ever seen Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
You know the raven, the three-eyed raven inside the tree?
Oh, no.
They had a couple of different actors play the three-eyed raven inside the tree.
Yeah.
Is an old guy. He just passed away, but he's
It's an
a
incredible character
yeah,
concept.
yeah, he's a
I
Nobel
didn't
Prize
see it.
winning actor. He's the son of the folklorist who used this botany term to talk about myth patterns around the world.
Oh,
So
wow.
he was also in Minority Report. You ever see Minority Report?
Mm-hmm. Long time ago.
Minority Report with pre-crime.
Yeah.
The Department of Pre-Crime.
How do you spell this?
Von, V-O-N, and then the second word is S-Y-D-O-W.
His father. That's his father, the folklorist, or that's the actor?
His father was a folklorist. Yeah, the actor is Max, just passed away. And his father was a folklorist who used this term oikotype, which is from botany. It means like a plant pattern that's found across different species. He said, "Oh, that's a great word. I'll use that for a myth pattern that's found across different cultures. An oikotype. It's like a pattern that keeps repeating. So a god that fights a serpent is an oikotype or a myth pattern that's found around the world. So you have Krishna dances on the head of a multi-headed serpent named the Kaliya Nag. And you have Odin, sorry, not Odin. Odin fights Fenris the wolf, right? But Thor's main enemy is the Midgard serpent, or the Jormungandr, he's sometimes called the Midgard serpent. And you have actually Apollo, the god in ancient Greece, who fights a serpent dragon named Python, the Python, when he's taking over the temple at Delphi. Apollo is. It used to belong to Python. You have this around the world. You have Maui of the Pacific Islands, he's a trickster figure. He's a demigod. He's part human, part God again. And that's a representation actually of us. We're a mixture of spiritual and physical. Okay. He fights a gigantic eel named Tuna. So Maui versus Tuna is another aspect of this. So it's seen in the heavens for sure. Oh, Hercules or Heracles, one of his 12 labors is to fight the Hydra, the 9-headed Hydra. And every time you chop off one head, 2 more grow back. And so there are different serpents in the sky, different constellations that'll play a serpent. We've already mentioned Draco. I don't particularly believe that Draco is not the serpent in most, but it's one of them. It's one of the serpents. Ophiuchus, that we've mentioned a lot, actually has a serpent on either side of it. So sometimes that's a serpent. Directly below the feet of Ophiuchus is Scorpio. Scorpio, of course, we would think, oh, well, it must be a scorpion. But actually, if you look at the constellation Scorpio in the sky, it's a serpent. It's a sinuous looking serpent, and then serpent body, just like a scorpion kind of has a, long tail. But it could also be envisioned as a serpent with multiple heads, actually, Scorpio. I could show it to you on constellations, but people can check out, my videos or blog posts where I talk about it. Scorpio plays a serpent.
You better.
Yeah, you better. It plays a serpent in a lot of myths. And then I also mentioned Hydra is not too far from Scorpio. That also plays a serpent. But anyway, Thor is associated with a constellation that's known as the constellation Hercules. We call it the constellation Hercules. So it's the same constellation that plays Thor, that plays Hercules. Like, what do they have in common? They both have big beards, right? Thor has a big square beard. Hercules has a big square beard. Zeus has a big square beard. They're all actually associated with, Dan has a big square beard. They're all associated with, Roman has a small pointy beard. They're all associated with the constellation Hercules, which actually the constellation itself has a square-shaped head, a distinctive square-shaped head in the sky.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't always play a male figure, though. Like I said, all constellations can sometimes play a female figure. And you say, well, wait a minute, how could you have a square-headed female figure? Well, Medusa or the Gorgons are a female figure, but they actually have snakes coming out of their hair. And actually, if you look at ancient artwork, it'll look like a beard almost sometimes. The snakes are all around their head.
Sick.
So anyway, just to close, I have gone off on a few tangents, but to answer your question, Dan, Hercules fighting the Hydra is the same constellations as Thor fighting the Midgard serpent, as Zeus Zeus fights a creature called Typhon who has serpents for legs. Typhon is actually probably associated with Ophiuchus, but these are constellations that are directly beneath Hercules. Apollo is probably associated with Sagittarius, which is pointing a bow towards Scorpio. So Apollo fights a serpent dragon being, but Apollo uses a bow, and Hercules, uses a club, or usually he's using a club. Zeus uses a thunderbolt. Thor uses a hammer, but they're all associated with the constellation Hercules, which in the sky is actually brandishing like a big weapon over its back, and it could be envisioned as a thunderbolt, as an axe, as a hammer, or as a sword,
and
or
that's
as a
Osiris.
club.
Is that Osiris?
Yeah, so Osiris, I've argued about Osiris being associated. Most people reflexively say, "Oh, we know for a fact Osiris is associated with Orion." So Orion is holding
that's
up
what
a club.
I mean. Yeah.
I've argued that Osiris is also associated with Ophiuchus. I've written a book called Ancient Worldwide System that talks about the different myths of different cultures, and it spends quite a bit of time on the myths of ancient Egypt and shows my argument for Osiris connections to the stars. But there's no doubt that the big picture is that they're all based on the stars, and it's an ancient language, and these different constellations have different associations in the language to tell us something. And one of the things that they're trying to tell us about is about ourself, and that you have suppressed your own self. And so when you have a god like Osiris who's been suppressed and buried, but he comes back because he's indestructible. You know why? Because your higher self, your true self, your authentic self, no matter what trauma you've gone through, is actually indestructible, just like Osiris.
That's why I have the crook and flail tattoos right here on my inner forearms.
Nice.
Because I've always associated myself with Osiris. There's something about the story, like you said. This is before I had gotten into.
I didn't even know that, Roman. I'll learn something new too.
But it's all about balance. Like it's the whole story of Osiris, and like you're saying it now, and it's actually, I'm just now realizing it, but it makes so much sense that astrotheologically, wow, it's astrologically, it's astrotheologically, that it ties into just stories about ourselves. Like and is the snake Kundalini energy? Does that have any tie to do with like us battling the snake, controlling that type of inner coil energy, or is any of that tie in?
Yeah, I totally believe that these stories are about you and putting all those different. I mean, we are these amazing. We're a body, but with, like you said, the chi energy or prana energy or the kundalini energy, reconnecting with self. So Dr. Peter Levine in that quotation says, trauma disconnects us from ourself, from our body, from our family, from wider humanity, and from nature. And I would add, from the universe, from the divine realm as well, the invisible realm. And so our body has like amazing, I would argue for sure, I'm not an expert in Kundalini, okay, but I have actually studied martial arts for a long time, and that stuff is real. I've been studying martial arts since 1992, and chi energy is real, and all that, all those things about raising, the chakras and those things are real. But the more we connect with, the more we recover self, the more we reconnect with our body and what it's trying to tell us. I mean, our body has amazing knowledge, like our gut wisdom, but we suppress it with our little defense mechanism voices that say, no, that can't be. Like, we all know that the Twin Towers coming down on 9/11, anyone can look at that and deep in their gut know that is not a product of two airplanes hitting those two buildings. and Building 7.
Twins. They're taking out
they're taking out the twins. But you can, that's right, the twin pillars of Solomon. You can look at that, and the implications of what you're seeing are so threatening to you that different defense mechanisms in your brain don't let what your gut is telling you about what's going on. The full implications are too scary, and you're like, no, I can't be what I think it is, which is I'm being lied to about something that's very, very scary. Because you see what I'm saying? So anyway, trauma disconnects us from ourselves and the messages that our body actually knows, including Kundalini. I haven't done the work to be an expert in that field. But for sure.
It's like the biofield, that we have, like energetically, trauma will deaden an energy spot in your biofield. And then it just needs, like, it can be healed with resonance, like sound resonance and frequency, right? With like tuning forks, which is like amazing. And I'm fully a believer in it. Tuna forks. Sorry. That's so cool. I love this stat. I love that actually, the tie away of your work, because you had a whole book on the trauma and the stars. And so like, that's just a fascinating blend, to go deep into the astrotheology and tying all that, and then to tie in something so real and personal to everybody that's affecting everybody, like trauma, and understanding it on another level like that is fascinating. I mean, like, that's a blend that, that's purely you. I mean, that's purely, that's amazing.
Well, there are lots of, I'm glad that I'm glad you asked that question about Kundalini and then brought in the trauma, because even if you're not raising your Kundalini, like, it probably takes some discipline and some training and, someone who knows what they're doing to kind of coach you into doing that. But the reconnection with self and the fighting of the Hydra, or of the serpent that all these different gods are fighting, has an application to that. What you just said, the trauma. There's a psychologist that I like a lot named Dr. Richard Schwartz, and I've learned a lot from. And he's the founder of what's called internal family systems therapy, which explains that we all have actually multiple personalities, and it's not a disorder. You've got multiple sides to who you are, and we're able to have all these different, we all have a different mix of gifts and talents, but the world wants to force you into a box and say, like, let's say you're a really gifted musician, and that's one expression of who you are, but you also happen to be like a really savvy business person, man or woman. And, maybe you're even a corporate, CEO or executive or something, but you're also an amazing guitar player or something. Well, the world wants to say, wait a minute, if you're a guitar player, you've got to, you can't be a businessman or a businesswoman. It'd be
homeless on the streets.
Exactly. You got to just be only an artist. Well, that's one expression of you. And then you've got a mix of all these different sides, and it's not contradictory to be good at lots of different things and to bring all those different. But what happens with trauma is those different sides of you can get into negative roles, they can get forced into playing like the part of you that's, when you get drunk and does crazy, wild stuff, you could have a positive expression of that, but it could also have a negative expression. Why is it expressing itself negatively or in self-sabotaging ways? Is because of trauma. So once you everything, once you allow self to really organize and harmonize the team, then those parts of you that are actually could be really, really positive, but are doing really, really negative things. That's what I think slaying the serpent is about, or these myths that are about. It's like it's like getting those parts of you under the direction of that godlike part of you, the divine part of you, that's self. So that's the part that can fix the. It's like the players on the basketball team. They all have their different talents, but if there's no coach, they're going to be arguing with each other, like who gets to take the shot, or who has to sit on the bench next. And they're fighting with each other. But when that perfect coach arrives, that knows exactly,
beautiful,
then they can just concentrate on being the best that they're. And when the coach says, "Hey, Jordan, I want you to sit out for the next 2 minutes so you're refreshed in the last minute of the game," he trusts the coach and he does it, and it all works, and the team lives up to its highest potential. But what we've done is we've locked the coach away. We've buried the coach because of some kind of trauma. And now all the parts of the team are fighting with each other. And so that's what I think the slaying of the serpent story that we find over and over around is about, the divine self putting all the pieces into the right harmony.
Wow. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. So
it does make it resonates very hard because it seems very,
we all experience that.
Yeah.
I was saying how these myths seem to have different levels, right? So this is like definitely a personal, physical level, and a celestial level. But I wonder if there's another level here. And so my question is, do you think like the killing of the serpent is also the destruction of the 13th month and of the constellation Ophiuchus?
Oh yeah,
and that this was like had to do with the world tilting and then losing that 13th constellation, and so this is kind of possessed in the myths also of this story of that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. So what you're referring to is the fact that the zodiac of constellations it's not a random thing. It's a specific set of constellations that the sun moves through during the year along what's called the ecliptic path. The ecliptic path is the path on which we have eclipses because the sun and the moon and the other planets follow this path, the path of the gods, right? The path of the gods. That's what the sun, moon, and planets moves along. And the path that they move along, the background stars that they move through are different constellations that are called the zodiac, the 12 constellations of the zodiac that we're all at least familiar with on some level: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, all the way around through the year. And the moon goes through them once a month. And they turn around the earth once a day, or the earth turns, causing them to go around us once a day. But there is a 13th constellation that actually has part of that constellation along that path that's not counted as one of the zodiac signs, and that is Ophiuchus. So Ophiuchus actually has 1 foot through which the ecliptic path passes. Okay, so Ophiuchus is mostly above the ecliptic, but it does dip its toe down into the ecliptic, so to speak. So the ecliptic does go through Ophiuchus, as well as it goes through Virgo and Leo and Libra and all those. So why is it Ophiuchus?
It has like the Captain Morgan.
Zodiac?
It has like the Captain Morgan pose, yeah?
Ooh, good. I haven't looked specifically at Captain Morgan.
He has 1 foot, 1 foot in the ground or in the water, and then 1 foot raised up, exactly up above, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a tarot card called, I'm not an expert in tarot, but people have, when I say, there's a tarot card where 1 foot is in the water and 1 foot is on land, they say, oh, that's star. Or that's the star.
The star card.
I got to look up Captain Morgan just real quick. Captain Morgan. We get an image on my screen. But so Ophiuchus does have 1 foot in the Milky Way and 1 foot not in the Milky Way. So you're right. That's 1 foot in the river or in the water and 1 foot up. It's actually it's not in the rift part of the Milky Way, but okay. I'm looking at Captain Morgan. He's got his foot on a barrel of rum here. Yeah. So you're right. I mean,
it's the Captain Morgan pose. It's the pose.
Okay, we could stretch that. Yes. Okay.
He was going for like an actual kind of deeper. He's like, there's something here. Oh goodness.
But there are passages in Revelation 8. I believe it's Revelation 8, where there's a Bible, an angel who's described as having 1 foot in the sea and 1 foot on the earth. In fact, it even says the right foot in the sea and the left foot on the earth, on the land. That's Ophiuchus. So Ophiuchus does have 1 foot in the water, 1 foot on the land, 1 foot in the Milky Way, which often plays a river, sometimes plays a Red Sea, sometimes plays a fire. So rising from the ashes. Is all esoteric.
We're esoteric as fuck around here.
Exactly. So where how did we get off on that? Oh, you were asking about the 13th zodiac.
Yes, yeah.
So
that is the best explanation I've heard of it so far as to why.
So it's like the hidden zodiac sign. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you my interpretation of that is that Ophiuchus very, very often plays the figure who represents your higher self, your authentic self. Okay. And your authentic self is like all your different parts. So I'm talking in terms of internal family systems therapy now that Dr. Richard Schwartz discovered. But IFS says you've got different parts. You got different aspects of who you are. And sometimes those parts will take on roles jobs that they kind of hate, just like we sometimes have to do a job that we kind of hate, but we feel like we're forced into it because of something. We have to. It's like, I got to hold this ship together. I'm going to have to become that part that always pleases other people, or I've got to be the part that puts out the fires when some trauma tries to rear its head again. Some hint of that trauma comes in. I'm going to jump in and start dousing everything with fire suppressant because I can't have that memory come back up. So a part will take on the role of a firefighter, is what Dr. Schwartz calls it, spraying, Captain Morgan on your problem. It's like, that deep-seated anxiety that I had from when I was very little, and my mom told me I could never do anything right. And I heard it over and over again. And now I feel like I can never do anything right. So then when I do something, stupid, that feeling starts bubbling up like, oh man, you're such a screw up. You can't do anything right. That feeling threatens to be so overwhelming that the part that's playing Captain Morgan, firefighter, says, don't let that feeling get too strong. Pour yourself a glass of rum right now and drink it. And then drink another one. Okay. So
nailed it there.
So the parts are not bad. They're actually trying to keep the whole system together, but they may be forced into a role that is actually self-destructive, right? You can destroy yourself. I mean, alcohol is a poison. You can drink enough to kill yourself in just one night, right? But you can certainly screw up your life if that part is actually thinking, I'm keeping us from that even more disturbing memory or feeling of you can't do anything right. You're such a screw up that's so deep. And the one that can fix that is your higher self, okay? Can go to that part and help it to figure out why it's doing that. And it's because there's another part that's carrying this trauma, this burden. It's called an exile part. This is all from internal family systems therapy, but the myths are absolutely talking about it. So there's all the different parts that's lined up with your zodiac constellations, but there's a higher part that's sort of like a zodiac constellation, but it's not. It's different. It's hidden from the zodiac. It's the Ophiuchus figure.
Fucking deep. That's it's expoundingly huge, and not on a mainstream narrative whatsoever, but it's happening to everybody. It's a literal story of because everybody's affected by trauma through societal engineering that's happened in the fucking terrible simulation that's being created by man. The systems that we've placed on ourselves is automatic trauma from birth. So to have this understanding that is right under everybody's fingertips and right under their nose and so close to them within they can understand it like this if they chose to, but just because of the way things are set up, they are not going to look in that direction unless they've hit rock bottom through deep depression. Like, how do you even come to these conclusions? A lot of times, you have to go through the fucking work to get there, and you have to understand it to get there. It takes one to know one. You know what I mean? Like, it's incredibly fascinatingly deep, and this is just so amazing. I'm just sorry. I'm very excited.
That's great. I love that response.
So what you're saying is Ophiuchus is supposed to be hidden because it's our higher self that we're supposed to find?
I've heard the theories that it's the patriarchy throughout the 13th one because of, and there may be something to that. I don't know. But my examination of the myths argues what you just said. I mean, that's a very perceptive rephrasing of exactly what I believe, Dan. Very, very perceptive. That is what I believe. The myths are using the whole sky as a coded language, and each of the different parts of it is a code that they knew this language, and it's worldwide, and worldwide. And Ophiuchus is like the perfect figure to help us to understand this concept of the suppressed authentic self. Okay. And what's so amazing, and Roman, I loved how you were just riffing and getting excited, because it like makes the hair on your arm stand up, because it's like Dr. Richard Schwartz discovered all this stuff about the way our internal family system works by talking to patients, thousands and thousands of patients, and discovering this. And he's discovered all this stuff about the way the mind works. And when I heard it, I already was exploring the myths this way. And I'm like, it is quite clear that the myths are talking about the same thing. It is quite clear that they're laying out for us that same understanding. And why wouldn't, if he's right about the way our internal family system works, which he is, I'm quite convinced he's right.
We'll take it.
And, these other cutting edge psychologist healers too, that I mentioned, Dr. Peter Levine, Dr. Gabor Mate, there's many psychologists who are talking about the way our minds work. Well, then of course, if the ancient myths are truly giving us true information about ourselves, which they also are, of course they're going to harmonize. They harmonize. They're telling it to us in a different language of what modern cutting edge healers have discovered. It's not like Dr. Richard Schwartz was looking at the myths and saying, how can I use the myths to interpret? He's looking at patients and figuring out a whole system, and he's using a totally different set of terms.
Real people.
Firefighters. He's saying, well, this is like firefighters, and this is like protectors, and this is like exiles. Well, the myths are full of those exact same roles. They just don't call them, the exact same terms that he's discovered. But it's the same concepts.
Do the different constellations in the zodiac have these different
personalities and connotations? Yes.
Yeah.
Is that what you're going to ask?
Yeah. Like aspects to the human condition.
Yes.
More so is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Like we know through like running, and it's like that's you being hasty or rushing, jumping to conclusions, or letting your temper run away with you. That those associations are lined up with that particular constellation, for instance. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly. Because most of the time what we think about it is like, Scorpio is my personality and that's how I act. But what I'm asking is there like a deeper meaning of our conscious reality that constellation is kind of controlling that aspect of our brain? And if we're based in different constellations, then we have different problems that we have to face because we have different polar opposites than somebody else. And so we go through these different trials and tribulations, and each one of these is a different trial and tribulation, just like in the story of Hercules and the 12 trials, and he has to go through each one. And so we have to go through each one and defeat these demons, so that way we can reach the Ophiuchus and get have that enlightenment self.
That's kind of the idea of the wheel and the journey.
Did I break that down right?
Yeah. That's like that's from my understanding. That's what the journey is on the astrological ride, and then having obvious, your chart.
Yeah.
has all the connections to all the stars, right? But you're heavily in this one area of your astral travel and your soul, And we talked about on the last show, it was on an intro or something, but talking about the purpose of life could be as Earth is a celestial body, right? I was going to ask you about this, David, what your thoughts are on growing Earth or expanding Earth theory, because that's something to me that resonates, as Earth is a planet. So it's a body of the same things that we're created with, and we grow and we have all the same things, the same workings. And then, but there's a conscious body and a conscious life, then there's the physical life. So it's like there's almost the two parts of Earth's body as well as Earth's consciousness tied in. So we amending the Earth's consciousness by just living and going through these trials and keep coming down to create and expand Earth's consciousness more, like, and heal that or something. I don't know. All right.
Wow, that's a big one. The Earth is pretty big. That's a good question. That's an interesting question. I don't know about the Earth expanding. I have heard that before. So it's pretty clear that our Earth has had catastrophes. I mean, we've got the scars of catastrophes on the Earth, no doubt. And I tend to believe that the best explanation for this worldwide system, so we've got this system that's operating worldwide. It's in the myths of the cultures of the Pacific, like the Maui stories.
That's some of the coolest stories, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're amazing. In Australia, the culture of Australia, which was very isolated for tens of thousands of years, a very ancient culture that, the Aboriginal indigenous people of Australia were continuing their traditions for tens of thousands of years undisturbed. And yet their myths have evidence of this system. And the stories of the Americas, the different nations of North America, the Native American nations of North America, have myths that are using this system. And the Inca and the Maya have myths that are using this system, and the Aztec and the Egyptians and the oldest cultures that we know of, or civilizations, let's call them, the oldest civilizations that we get taught about, Egypt or ancient India or ancient Mesopotamia, have this system already fully developed in their myths. So it must be even more ancient than Mesopotamia, even more ancient than Egypt, right? So how do you explain that?
Holy shit.
I think the best explanation is that there was even before the oldest cultures we know of, there was some system that then there was a catastrophe of some sort of a cataclysm, and it got splintered and fragmented, and people had to pick up the pieces after this catastrophe and hold on to what they had, hold on to the pieces of it that they remembered. And it's like different cultures have different aspects of it, but they're all clearly connected. So I think there was clearly
like the
some
Egyptians
kind of
moving into the pyramids as opposed to building the pyramids.
There's some great evidence that the dynastic Egyptian civilization inherited a lot of what is attributed to them. You guys should check out Uncharted X if you haven't checked out his Ben at Uncharted X. Makes some amazing videos.
I'll watch them.
Looking specifically at some of the technologies and things. Ben at Uncharted X.
Snake
Talking
Bros.
About, the Snake Brothers.
And that was the girl to Johanna James.
Yeah, she's on with NEXT. Do you know NEXT? He just moved to Egypt, in fact.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's doing a
nice.
tour with. He's doing a tour with Johanna Jameson, I think is her name. But
that's a dream.
Yeah. So, but I'm not sure about expanding Earth. It's quite possible that planets are contracted stars, right? Stars that have burned out. I mean, I don't know. So now physicists are cringing and throwing out all my books. I don't know. I don't know for a fact.
To me, it seems like, like if as above, so below, fractalizing micro, macro, so on and so forth, all these things, everything that's happening within our bodies on a cellular level is happening outside on a different matter level. So like, we have the different forms of matter and, the different, the elements, it's also fascinating, but ties in and then when you take all the numbers and expand it out, creates a shape, some sort of shape that's resonant somehow and connects in. Dear sweet Lord, I'm getting to a point here though.
No, you're hitting on some very important things, because ancient cultures arranged their societies in specific ways that did reflect the heavens, that reflected the heavens and that aligned with the heavens, and also aligned with earth energies. Ley lines, they're called in England.
Yes.
Dragon lines, they're called in China. There's an actual, term in Chinese for dragon lines, and you don't build a railroad across, the dragon's tail. And these are earth energies. The earth does have, a energy grid that we can align with and be in harmony with, or we can ignore and be in disharmony with. And so it's like feng shui. Do you know the concept of feng shui and organizing your house, which I need to do better, in line with the heavens? And okay, well, the north facing part gets this kind of energy, and the south facing part gets this kind of energy, and the way the front door is facing gets this kind of energy. And we want to, as much as possible, harmonize and get it in conjunction with the earth's energy that the earth is sitting there giving off all the time.
And the body has the same energies.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So that's what I was thinking
through society.
Maybe these constellations were, we figured out it was a story of the earth trauma and the earth's body. So it's like, if it's our story, it's the earth's story. And if it's your story, it's our story, because we are, I guess, seemingly the same.
Fractalization of the same thing.
I mean, I don't fucking know, but it's crazy and beautiful. And I wanted to straight up ask you specifically, because we've been doing a lot of God, Satan, specific breakdowns. And so astrotheologically, like constellations of Satan, Lucifer, and or fallen angels.
Yeah, good question. So, I knew you guys were going to ask this, because you told me in advance, hey, this is the month. This is the month that we're doing this topic.
We need to get specific real quick.
Yeah. So, I am convinced that all the myths are based on the stars. Okay. So as I said before, I'm convinced that Moses is a constellation. It doesn't mean that the story isn't telling us something truthful, but I don't get hung up on historical Moses, because I am convinced that I'm waving my arms around and hitting things. I'm convinced that is celestial metaphor. Okay. Same thing with Jesus. Same thing with the Buddha. They are there to teach you something about this situation of yourself. Okay. And the devil as well. Okay. So is there an external devil? Is there an external Satan? Maybe. But the important thing, is there an external Jesus? Okay. If Jesus is representative of your higher self and of reconciling with your higher self and getting back in harmony with your higher self, okay, then see, I don't believe that there needs to be a historical Jesus. And
Jesus is a fucus.
Jesus is a fucus, but also Aquarius sometimes. Okay. So, but definitely a fucus. For sure, a fucus. Okay. And so is Moses. Yeah. And if we need to stop at a hard time, let me know. But I know we're coming up on more than 2 hours here. The adversary, okay, so the word Satan means adversary. The word devil also means adversary or enemy. Lucifer is something completely different. That means light bringer. Okay, and that word is really found once in the Bible, in the scroll of Isaiah or the book of Isaiah, and the word that it's translating is Hel-El or Halel or Hellel. It's spelled
Lord of Hell.
H-E-L-E-L. Well, H-E-L is Helios. Okay,
Oh,
Helios.
Helios.
And Elios. Okay, that's a light, a sun, a brightness. Okay, it means brightness. It is associated with morning star, the morning star, which is Venus.
That
So
makes a lot more sense.
Heliocentric model would be the Luciferian model.
Very interesting. I'm
Fuck.
I'm actually on record as saying there are some problems with the heliocentric model. There's a
for sure.
There's a researcher named Simon Shack and also his co-researcher named Patrick Lundqvist, and they have written some very, very interesting research about the possibility that we're in a binary system that explains the motions much better than a simple heliocentric Keplerian model. There's also a researcher named Walter Crittenden who talks about a binary system in a different type of he's got a different model, but I think there's very, very good evidence that we're in a binary system of some sort, not a single heliocentric system. But now I've gotten off. Oh yeah, we're talking about the devil. Okay. So the adversary, the adversary, the word means like the adversary in a court of law, or the accuser. In the court of law, you've got an adversarial system. Well, in the zodiac, you also have an adversarial, or there's a sign that's the opposite on the wheel from any given sign has an opposite on the wheel as well. Does that make sense? An adversary. Like if you look at Sagittarius, directly across from Sagittarius is Gemini.
Yeah.
Okay. So
alchemically speaking, it's negative, positive, in order to create the centrifugal energy, you got to have it.
You got to have the two forces. Okay. Drive it. So look, I was talking about the parts that can self-sabotage us. Okay. So I was going to actually read you guys a quote from Plato. There's a quote from the Phaedrus. It's one of the dialogues of Plato, the Phaedrus or the Phaedrus. And it's called that because Plato makes these imaginary dialogues of Socrates talking. And Socrates is talking to different people. In this case, he's talking to a young man named Phaedrus who's trying to figure out the world. And so this dialogue is called the dialogue with Phaedrus. And so Phaedrus is saying, hey, tell me, Socrates, isn't it somewhere around here that they say Boreas seized Oreithyia from the river? That's Boreas is a wind god and Oreithyia is a beautiful maiden. So it's a myth. And they're walking along, and Socrates is walking along with this young man who's trying to figure out the meaning of life and all this stuff. What happens to the soul after it dies, blah, blah, blah. And, or after the body dies. Sorry, I should say that better. Yeah. And so, Boreas, isn't this where the wind god sees that young woman from the river? Isn't this the actual spot? It looks like this. And then Phaedrus says, certainly the water looks charmingly pure and clear. It's just a place for girls to be playing beside the stream. So this looks, like it matches up with the myth. Socrates says, well, actually, the tradition says it was about a quarter of a mile lower down where you cross close to the sanctuary of Agra. That there's an altar there dedicated to Boreas right there. And Phaedrus says, I've never really noticed that, Socrates, but do you believe that story to be true? So here we have Plato is actually diving into the meaning of the myths. And Socrates says, I should be quite in the fashion if I disbelieved it, as men of science do. I might proceed to give a scientific account of how the maiden, while at play with Pharmakia, I guess that's her companion, was blown by a gust of Boreas down from the rocks, and having thus met her death, was said to have been seized by the god of the wind, though it may have happened on the Areopagus, according to another version of the occurrence. For my part, Phaedrus, I regard such theories as no doubt attractive. So these theories have a certain attraction to them, but I regard them as attractive, but as the invention of clever industrious people who are not exactly to be envied. So that's the kind of a way of saying the kind of people who you don't want to be. Those are kind of these theories are attractive, but they're not wise. The people who are dreaming them up are not, they're spending a lot of energy in the wrong direction. For my part, then he says, he talks about Gorgons and Perseuses and Pegasuses and the Chimera and other monsters. And he says, I myself certainly have no time for the business, and I'll tell you why, my friend. I can't as yet know myself, as the inscription at Delphi enjoins. And so long as that ignorance remains, it seems to me to be ridiculous to inquire into extraneous matters. Okay, what's going on? Let me apologize for reading a long passage, but I think it's really illustrative because Plato is obviously, he's telling you something, but not necessarily directly. He's like putting it into a story. And Socrates is saying, there's people who try and explain this all different ways, but I don't get caught up in it because I don't yet know myself. And until I know myself, I'm not going to chase after speculation. And so I think that's a hint from Plato, a very strong hint that the myths,
deep too.
What are they actually about? What are the myths actually about? What are they trying to point you towards? Knowing yourself. So it's about knowing yourself. Once you know yourself, but don't chase after. So who's the devil? Who's Satan? Socrates would say, know yourself. And look, is there an accuser inside of you? Do you have a part of you that plays the role of the devil goes around sabotaging things or doing things to harm others? Do you have a part of you that sometimes takes over? Let's say, let's say you have an addiction. I'm not saying any of us have an addiction, but let's just say, for the sake of hypothetical, that an addiction sometimes becomes so strong that it just totally takes you over, like completely, like your brain, you feel like your brain has just been like invaded by an alien that just takes over, and you've got to have that, whatever it is, whether it's pornography or drugs or whatever it is.
Sugar
takes over your brain. Now, is that, you could say, well, maybe that was the devil that took over my brain externally. Is that possible? Yes, sure it is. It could be, but it could also be from one of your parts of you that's trying to put out a certain trauma, or a certain trauma is welling up. And, you find that you particularly fall into that overwhelming need when you felt like you really screwed something up, or when you felt like you really, some kind of ancient trauma came bubbling up. And then all of a sudden that took over your brain. And if you explain it to someone else, well, I got took over by this external thing, they might say, well, that's a nice excuse, but really it's you. It's some part of you. So is there a devil outside of us? I don't know, but we certainly have an adversary inside of us that will make us do things. And it almost feels like you're being taken over by something else, like a demon possession or whatever. Is demon possession real? Potentially, but Socrates would say, I'm not going to get too speculative here. I want to know myself. What I'm saying is there an external Jesus? Maybe. I think it's internal, but if you want to believe that there's an external, literal, historical, that's fine. I believe it has to do with higher self and knowing and reconnecting with higher self. And same thing with an external devil, or the devil, the Satan figures in the myths, in the stories. This is the Bible. We have Loki plays a figure that's an adversary. He comes into the hall of the gods and starts accusing and making fun of and calling out and belittling all the gods and goddesses. He'll say, oh, Thor, what about that time when your wife, that he's like there to criticize and put down and make you feel like shit. And
Loki for that.
And we have that aspect. We don't need an external Loki to do that inside our own head. We already have that voice inside of us, right? Like, I mean, we do have that critical, at least I have a critic voice that is at least as effective as Loki at making me feel, about 3 inches tall, right? So that, I believe that power, that force, that energy is what the myths are depicting with these figures that are like the negative form of Satan, the adversary. The word Satan means accuser, and Satan is certainly, but he's actually one of the many different parts in the Bible. In the book of Job, all the angels are coming together, and Satan comes too, and God says and talks to Satan, and it's like he's one of the parts. You have all these different aspects to who you are, and even the accuser part can actually play a role that helps you get better in some ways. I'm not saying that doing harmful things to people. I'm not talking about that. But, Dan, you were mentioning that you're reading the Bhagavad Gita or listening to it, and the Bhagavad Gita's message over and over is do what's right without attachment, or do the right thing, do your duty without worrying about the outcome. Now, satanic evil, there are evil, the whole Bhagavad Gita is before this giant battle of Kurukshetra, and the bad guys are truly bad guys in that battle. They're called it's the Pandavas versus the Kauravas, and the Kauravas are led by just a hideous, evil guy who's always doing negative, putting down people, debasing people, degrading people, taking what's theirs, horrible things. So it's not that there's no such thing as evil. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. The Bhagavad Gita says, do what's right without worrying about the outcome, not do whatever the hell you want and don't worry about the outcome. That would be, kill people, steal, do whatever you want. Don't worry about the outcome. That's like the Kauravas. That's negative. That's evil. That's satanic. But what I'm saying is that the myths are talking about something that's going on inside of us. It may also be going on in the energetic realm. Like, are there demons? Maybe. But like Socrates in this story, I'm going to focus on the know thyself aspect of it, because I think that's what it's really for sure about. For sure, it's about something that's going on inside your own head.
Yeah.
Like when that addiction takes over me, or when that anger takes over me, and just I turn into a monstrous, angry, yelling jerk. That's for sure going on inside of me. I can deal with those issues. I think I want to do the know thyself work first, and then speculate on whether there's, demons running around out there too.
What's the opposite constellation of Ophiuchus, though?
Okay, so actually,
if Satan's the adversary to God or Jesus,
what is Satan
the opposite?
Ophiuchus is actually right next to Sagittarius. He's in between he or she. Ophiuchus can play a female figure just as often. Athena, the goddess, is an Ophiuchus figure. She's the goddess of wisdom. Yeah. Just as Solomon is an Ophiuchus figure, and he's the wisest king. So, but wisdom can be used negatively or positively. But anyway, Ophiuchus is in between Sagittarius and Scorpio. And Scorpio, so sometimes in the Bible, Jesus will say, he will describe hell, or the eternal fire, as the place where their worm will not turn, the worm will not turn, and the fire does not die out. That's talking about Scorpio is the worm that doesn't turn, and it's right in the Milky Way, which is the fire that doesn't die out. There's a passage in Revelation where the bottomless pit is opened, and there's scorpion people come out, and they have stingers like scorpions, and that's in Revelation chapter 9. I want to say 9. I could be wrong. That's talking about Scorpio and Sagittarius, and the way we depict the devil with like a reptilian tail and horse's feet is associated with the constellation Sagittarius, which Sagittarius has a lot of positive connotations too. But the Satan figure, the way that figure has been depicted or imagined has a lot of Sagittarius aspects. And so there's a lot of evidence to argue that the character of Satan, when he's talking to God or talking to an angel, is Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is right next to Ophiuchus, and Ophiuchus plays an angel. And so when God brings in all the angels and Satan comes along too, that's Sagittarius next to Ophiuchus, I would argue.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd have to show it to you to really drive home these arguments, but
I looked it up on the internet real quick, and it said Osiris was the opposite in the constellations of Ophiuchus.
That's interesting. Well, so Sagittarius and Ophiuchus and Scorpio are all down at the very bottom of the year. So if you imagine a zodiac wheel,
okay, yeah, exactly.
Where the sun goes down to its lowest point in the sky for the northern hemisphere, not for the southern hemisphere. I'm doing some sphere mongering secretly to give your listeners some subtle hints that we have a sphere. I got that from Graham on Grimerica. Stop sphere mongering. But the lowest point that the sun goes is at the winter solstice, or the December solstice for the northern hemisphere is our winter. It's actually the summer height of summer for Australia, wherever Australia is, right? So that lowest point, that's the lowest point of hell, darkness, and that's where Sagittarius, Scorpio, and Ophiuchus are all located. And why is that? Because that's where the turn back upwards also happens. That's where the second birth actually happens. That's where, so we're actually, I've put out a video somewhere along the line where I argue, and I'm not the first to say this, that this lower realm that's being described as hell, that's where we are right now. And it's not, we're in the place.
Cosmologically speaking.
Yeah. So, esoterically speaking, we're in the lower realm. We're not in the higher realm right now. We're in the realm of ignorance and mixture with physical and darkness. Yeah. So that's why the Satan figure is located down there at the lowest point.
I just thought it was interesting because Osiris is also associated with like Enki, and like Enki plays the stereotypical Satan figure or Luciferian figure in the mythos, and you can get into all kinds of myths associated with him, but it seems like he also has split himself into many pieces, and he is encompassing many different aspects, and like he's Prometheus, he's Neptune, he's Satan. He's,
like Osiris was cut apart, you mean? Is that what you're saying?
Osiris was cut apart into different pieces and spread out all over the world. It's kind of like evil being spread out all over the world.
So I don't see Osiris as an evil figure.
Okay.
And Prometheus, so Prometheus is also bound. The Bible talks about Satan being bound for 1,000 years. Prometheus is bound, and he brings fire. So that's the Lucifer. The Lucifer aspect is bringing fire down to the lower realm. Okay, that's where we are right now. So it's like the spark of divine being plunged down into the lower realm, and we are actually. Like I said, I mentioned Alvin Boyd Kuhn a lot. He says your body is the burning fire of hell. That's what you're working your way through all those things right now. You've got the fire from heaven, but it's been plunged down into this lower realm. Anyway, Prometheus is actually a positive figure, right? But
for humans.
For humans, right? The gods are like, we've got to punish this guy. Have an eagle eat out his liver. Yeah. He's also an Ophiuchus figure. There's an eagle in the sky, Aquila, which in Spanish is águila, right? Is an eagle. There's a constellation of an eagle right next to Ophiuchus. And so Prometheus is, that's right. That's right. Eagles and serpents. And Scorpio is right below the eagle too. Scorpio is directly below Ophiuchus. So that's, the Mexican flag with the eagle eating attacking the serpent on the cactus, the rattlesnake.
Because Scorpio can be serpent as well.
That's right. So, and Ophiuchus could look like a cactus, actually. I hadn't thought about that before. But so Enki and Enlil are actually, it's interesting that you bring them up. And Enki for sure is associated with Ophiuchus, and Enlil, I would argue, is associated with Hercules. But Enki is actually a benevolent figure towards humanity as well. He's the one who warns Utanapishtim about the flood. And his name, Enki, it means Lord Mound. And Ophiuchus looks like a mound or a mountain. And Enlil means Lord Wind. So that's and that's a different constellation. So all these, they're all using the same system. But Alvin Boyd Kuhn, who, like, I refer to him a lot, and I did some, as I'm thinking about how I'm going to try and explain this, he really focuses on, this is trying to tell you about your condition right now. We are in this lower realm trying to work things out. And the bringing of the fire, the spirit, the spark, the divine spark, the spark of the gods, the fire of the gods, down into the clay. That's what Prometheus was doing. He created the people out of the clay, and he was sad that they didn't have, the spark of divine spark. So he snuck the fire down to mankind. That's actually a benevolent thing, but he gets punished for it. And Loki gets bound the exact same way to a rock and dripped venom on. So these figures, Loki, people will say, oh, Loki is a Satan figure, and he is depicted with horns in some artwork that you can find on stones, like in
Enki also.
And Ophiuchus figures will sometimes be depicted with horns. So there's a constellational reason for that. So the Ophiuchus figure is like the intermediary between the heaven and the realm that we're in, or between the zodiac and the divine realm. And that's what yourself is like, the intermediary. That's where the divine spark comes down to us through self. So reconnecting with self. That's why I'm saying all these myths are about reconnecting with self. To experience all that stuff that they're talking about is on an esoteric level to try and tell you, the more you get in touch with self, that's where your creativity comes from. Like when an artist, a musician will say, well, I don't know where that song came from. It just felt like it came from, like heaven somewhere, or the gods just gave it to me. That's what your higher self will lead you towards those things. But that's what the myths are trying to point you towards.
There's something crazy about that too, like you just say, because I love playing music. It's like one of my biggest passions. Trying to make money playing music is like seemingly not, because I'm not that guy that's like really good at music and then also an amazing savvy businessman, unfortunately. But when I lived in Hawaii for a long time on the Big Island. And it has, an active volcano that's like currently always just has a caldera filling with lava, right? And then just thinking about energy and magmatic energy. Okay, we're talking about life source energy coming to surface from maybe the center, wherever it comes from, And when I was in Hawaii, I would just continuously keep writing songs, and I literally would just it just happens because but then I come here and like it's so hard for me to really get into tune and focus, and I'm like wondering what these locations geographically on Earth have to do with symbolizing different parts of the constellation. Or, these parts of transformation, and are we supposed to travel all over the world throughout our life to fulfill some of the cycle?
Yeah, interesting question. What I'll say is that there's a book by John Michel and Christine Rohn that actually Scott Onstott told me about, and that it's called 12 Tribe Nations, and it talks about how all around the world the nations would set themselves up in this way that would that would enhance creativity and people living up to their full potential and expressing themselves and being able to make, these amazing ships and artwork. And you don't need to go around the world to a certain spot. What you have to do is get in harmony at the spot that you're at.
Yeah.
So
straight up.
But I do think that there are places on Earth where those kind of energies are just kind of bubbling out. But it's a great question. Yeah,
definitely not Starbucks, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like, can we create a society that's more harmonious, or can we create a society that's more trauma-inducing? And it's like we're creating one that's more trauma-inducing instead of more harmonious. And what we want to do is figure out how to do the other.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like even then, because thinking about did you just say Star Forts, Dan, or did I hear?
No, I didn't.
Starbucks.
Okay, so Star Forts, were they're like a type of architecture, like a geometric type of structuring a town, structuring a place, right? Energetically. So our ancestors knew everything about resonance, and they knew everything about energy and connection to the cosmos and so on and so forth. And we're being traumatized even down to the core of not being built, like not being connected to our city and understanding those types of energetic forces are at play. Like that's automatic traumatizing. Everything in society is seemingly built that way. And it's so suspect and it's so annoying. It's hard to break out of it. And it's hard to even want to continue to keep fighting the good fight, because it's so fucking difficult when you know this kind of shit and you like learn this stuff and like for me, I'm like, society is it's been built on some just really sketchy grounds. And I feel often outcast from it, and it's hard to connect back in there and hard to maneuver around life a lot of times.
Well, and I think there's forces that want you to feel that way. And, but you're expressing something really important, really powerful. And I know we're coming up on 2 hours and 40 minutes. I got to let my dog out before he,
oh, sweet.
No, but this is a great place, I think, to kind of wrap up with some positive, what you said. I appreciate your sharing those kinds of feelings. And, cause I totally feel that too of, it's so overwhelming. Like, oh man, it's like the trauma inducing forces are winning. But the whole Bhagavad Gita is Arjun at the start of the battle. He actually has all the weapons to win. He's got all the tools that he needs to win, but he's filled with doubt. And he sits down on the ground and he says, I just don't know if I want to even get into this battle. I just don't know I don't know how it's going to work out.
Self-doubt.
I don't know which side is right. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And Krishna, his divine charioteer, higher self, he's not going to fight the battle for Arjun, but he's going to drive the chariot for Arjun. He's going to give Arjun the words of encouragement and wisdom, because Arjun has everything he needs to be victorious. He's actually gone up to heaven and received these different celestial weapons in the story of Mahabharata that Bhagavad Gita is part of. He's got everything he needs, but he's full of doubt. And, the people who are going against the pattern of the ancients, the gods, the arrangements that we used to know, they're the ones who are the wrong ones, right? It's like we've got all the ancient myths, all that wisdom. They're appropriating it and using it for the wrong purposes. But the ancient myths say, it doesn't work out very well for King Midas. He has to go back to Dionysus and say, okay, I finally learned my lesson. I was wrong. And I think everyone can finally learn that lesson. Even the King Midas is, even the people who are doing the wrong things, they're a potential ally if they could just wake up like King Midas did. And
they'd be powerful as well, and it would be
they could do so good. Yeah, they could do so much good. And so I think we got to not, like Arjun, despair. We got to listen to the the message of Krishna is, don't worry about the outcome, Arjun. Worrying about the outcome is going to just fill you with doubt. You actually have everything you need. Just do what's right, and don't be so concerned with saying, well, if I do this, I still don't think we'll win. Just if it's the right thing, just do it anyway. That's what the Bhagavad Gita. But I could point to I could point to many different myths. Perseus going to fight Medusa. I use that a lot because it's so encouraging to me. Could Perseus defeat Medusa? Not without the help of the gods, he couldn't. It's an impossible task. How do you defeat something if you look at it, it turns you to stone? How do you fight that? It's impossible.
Epic story. An epic fucking story, by the way.
But if you listen, but the gods are there to help and give him the tools he needs. Hey, Perseus, we're not going to fight Medusa for you, but I will give you these winged sandals. I will give you this cap of invisibility. I will give you this shield that's reflective. And so it's just like Arjun. He got help from the gods. He got the tools that he needed, but he still had to go do it. And even though it's a seemingly impossible task, and even though it's hard to figure out which way is right, and it's like, am I even going to make the right choice here? Well, if you just try and do what's right without worrying about the outcome, Krishna says, that's all you can do. And so I think, I appreciate that you expressed that. I think it's a great kind of place to end on a positive note that
for sure.
We're sitting here. It's like we're facing a task as impossible as Perseus, or as perplexing as Arjun was facing in the Battle of Kurukshetra in Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata. And yet we do actually have everything we need. The gods, or the divine realm, are on the side of doing what's right to build up the nations and help the people, not beat them down and traumatize them. That's the wrong thing. So if we're doing the right thing, the gods are actually, it's shown over and over in the myths, that's what they want to have happen. And the Midas choice is going to end up with a disaster.
Yeah. Excellent.
So thank you. So, that was beautiful. That is a beautiful way.
I appreciate your question.
Very well done. Very well said. Thank you so much, David, for joining us on the show today. We appreciate it. I really, great insight into the star myths. It's even more great insight into just self-realization and all that, man. So many thoughts going through my mind right now about, all these things, lot to chew on here. I think that this all fits right in with the whole concept that we're working with this month. And it definitely is going to shed some light on some things for some people. And so I think it's going to make them kind of internalize and really kind of think out, what their life path is and what they're doing with it. And I think that's all we can, that's the best thing that we can get out of it too, thank you, and tell the people where they can find you at, and maybe some of the different books because you've wrote books on the Norse myths, on biblical, and what are some of the other ones that you've wrote about in the star myths?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Dan and Roman. I appreciate the long form, format. I appreciate the work that you guys put into doing this. I appreciate people who've listened through this whole thing.
Yes, thank you guys so much.
I appreciate the chance to get my message out to, people who maybe haven't heard it before, but also I appreciate questions that I haven't heard before, or that, let me, caused me to think about some things and bring out some other sides of what I've been working on. So my main website is called I've got a website called undyingstars.com. That's where I'm putting together some courses now. So I've got 2 courses that are out there. It's called the Undying Stars Academy. So undyingstars.com is where my first 2 courses, they're laying out the foundations. And then I've got one coming up on the Bible that's going to be released pretty soon. My main website with all my different books on there is called starmythworld.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, starmythworld. on Instagram. And so in the link in the bio on Instagram, I've got one of those link trees, just like you guys have.
Mm-hmm.
That'll take you to the podcast archive. That'll take you to the courses. That'll take you to the books. That'll take you to videos. I've made, many dozen videos. Blog. I've got a blog with like over 1,200 blog posts out there.
Wow.
So,
are you Star Myth World on YouTube
Instagram.
also?
So on YouTube, it's actually called Mathisen Corollary. That was the name of my very first book. And there's a link to my YouTube channel in that link tree on Instagram too. Okay. So for a lot of people nowadays, I think Instagram is like the easiest hub to find all my stuff.
Yeah.
Because that link tree will take you to all of them. But Star Myth World is kind of my longest running website. And my new thing is, so I got 10 books, but I also have this course now because a lot of this stuff really lends itself well to videos because it's very visual. The books have a lot of pictures and star charts too, but my latest project is working on some courses. So I've got a couple of courses up there now that are talking about this system and this language and this and the celestial mechanics that we've talked about, a little bit of precession, things like that, how the moon works, what the ecliptic is, what a solstice is, what an equinox is, all that, and how it fits into the system. That's on undyingstars.com. So I just hit you with a whole bunch of stuff, but nice. You can get it all through the Instagram.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. Thank you so much. We would love to have you back on the show. I really wanted to get into the Southern Hemisphere and kind of the star myths that come from there and what civilizations have these Southern star myths, Southern Hemisphere star myths, because it almost seems like they're all Northern to me. Like, we mentioned a bunch of them, but it seems like they all have Northern connotations. So I'm interested in finding out what civilizations have the Southern star myths used in their stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I'll just quickly say that from pretty much everywhere on Earth, you can see the zodiac. Like if you just imagine that the Earth is a sphere. I know some people may, turn off their phones right here, but if the Earth is a ball sitting in the middle of a room, your bedroom, let's say, or your office or your living room or your kitchen, there's a ceiling, there's 4 walls, there's the floor. If you're on the tippy top of the ball, you can see the ceiling, but you can also see the walls on either side, right? Down to a certain point. Well, the zodiac is about halfway around the wall. Like it's halfway up the walls all the way around. So you can even see it from the tippy top of the ball, but it'll be right down by the horizon. You won't hardly be able to see it. But the further south you go, the more you'll be able to see the stuff on the wall. Eventually, you'll be able to see the floor too if you go far enough. From the top of the ball, you can't see the floor, right?
Right.
From the bottom of the ball, you can't see the ceiling. But from just about anywhere on the ball, you can see the walls. Okay, so the constellations of the zodiac are in the middle of the walls. Okay,
so you have to have south to get the full picture.
Well, everywhere on Earth you can pretty much see them, but they are going to be upside down when you get to the bottom half of the ball. When I went to New Zealand, Orion, it's just like if there's a poster on my wall, like your poster there, the Sasquatch with you got a phoenix and you've got okay. If I'm on a ball and I'm looking at that poster, the Sasquatch is going to be standing up. But if I get to the bottom, the ground is still going to be beneath my feet because I'm being pulled to the center of the ball. But as I'm looking out at the wall, I'm upside down. The Sasquatch is going to look upside down to me down there.
That's like tarot and Hermeticism almost. It's like Hermetic kind of has a vibe of like, the tarot card is upside down depending on what you're. Wow, that's quite fascinating. We'll let you go, David.
Yeah. All right.
Let's go back into it.
Questions.
Thank you so much, brother.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, I hope you got it all on tape, but if you didn't, it's great talking just to you guys.
Yes.
We did.
That was really fun. Take care, Dan and Roman.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Should anyone like seems
from the ashes to see the light and the truth behind the big curtain on the stage. I'm just looking for answers behind lost time. Lost time. If everything exists within our atmosphere, then the memory remains. The memories remain. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Therefore, the past is there to be discovered. To discover who we truly are. Because we're just looking for answers. To see if this is all just a simulation. And I'm not sure anymore. Life does just seem to be a blur anymore. Will we rise from the ashes?